Are you still doing repetitive tasks every day, copying and pasting data from one place to another like a robot? Let me introduce you to n8n Total, the course where you will learn to build real automations without writing a single line of code. And you will build it all yourself step by step with the feeling of playing with a visual, intuitive and seriously fun app, n8n. I am Federico Garay, a best-selling instructor proud to have been awarded the Instructor Partner Medal by Udemy with hundreds of thousands of students who say they have achieved their goals thanks to my courses. This course is designed to give you more than just knowledge. You will have your own AI agent up and running from the very beginning. Automate, save time, and let the machines do the work for you. This is n8n Total, and now may the flow be with you. I will be waiting for you in lesson number 1. What is n8n? Imagine you go to grocery shopping every single day. It takes up your time and you would really like to automate this process somehow, so it just happens, freeing you up to do something else. One day, you realize that your son is now old enough to do the shopping for you, but you need to make sure that he follows every step exactly the way you want. So you decide to structure this shopping flow clearly and logically so he knows exactly what to do at each step. Then you draw it out for him like this. At 10 a.m., stop whatever you're doing and start the shopping process. First, grab the shopping list I'll leave on the fridge door. Then head to the supermarket. Once there, collect all the items from the list. If there are self-checkout machines, use them. If not, go to a human cashier. If you use self-checkout, pay with the card. If it's a human cashier, pay with cash. Once you're done, if you're running short of time, come straight home. But if you're still early, drop by and say hi to Grandpa. Then head home. Oh, and of course, let me know when you're done. This, in technical terms, is an automated workflow. And that's exactly what n8n does. It lets you visually structure any digital workflow involving apps, online services, websites, remote accounts, and more. Basically, with n8n, you can create agents that do the work for you, and the best part is that building those agents is something visual, intuitive, and actually really, really fun. So, in a nutshell, n8n it's a workflow automation platform, which, in other words, it's a place where you can organize a sequence of applications and actions so that they run automatically in a specific order. That's what we call workflow automation. Let me explain it with a quick, more technical example. Imagine that a visitor to your website fills out a form. A workflow will automatically trigger when the form is submitted, take that data and add it to a spreadsheet, send the user a personalized email thanking them for filling out the form, and if needed, notify you via Telegram or Slack. But it doesn't stop there. The workflow could also validate the email, enrich the data with additional info from another API, like checking their country or their social media profiles, and depending on the form response, automatically assign a label in your CRM, schedule a meeting in your calendar, or even start an automated email sequence. All of this without writing a single line of code. That's what makes n8n such a powerful tool. You can load up a series of actions and automate work processes that save you tons of time and energy. n8n isn't the only tool that does this, of course. There are others well-known platforms like Zapier, Make, or Power Automate, but n8n has one big difference. It's open source and highly customizable. So you can think of n8n as a tool that connects different apps and makes them work together automatically, no more clicking around all day. What can I do with n8n? You can automate repetitive tasks like sending emails when forms are submitted, connect different apps like Google Sheets, Notion, Slack, Airtable, Trello, CRMs, ERPs, and so much more, query external APIs, for example, retrieving data from an internal system or services like GitHub, OpenAI, or Stripe. You can transform and route data, for example, fetch records from a database, filter them, and send them via WhatsApp. Why has n8n become so popular? First, because it's visual. You can build workflows without writing code, but you can use code if you want. Also because it's powerful and flexible. You are not limited to specific integrations like with Zapier. Also because it's open source. You can install it wherever you want without paying for each automation. n8n is an essential ally for modern workflows, and that's why we're going to learn how to use it from scratch in the next lesson. Do you want to see the magic of n8n? In this lesson, you are going to experience it firsthand because we are going to demonstrate just how useful and practical this tool really is. n8n allows you to create workflows, and what you are seeing on screen it's a sample workflow that I developed just so you can see many of the things that n8n can do for us. This workflow starts essentially with a web form where users can enter their data. Imagine this form is one of your websites, or maybe you send it via email, however they access it. The point is that someone reaches the form and leaves their information. n8n, in this case, will then trigger a flow where many things happen behind the scenes. Once the user submits the form, the data will interact with many applications, some you may already know and others you might just be discovering. But what I want to show you here is that once you've configured your workflow, most of the tasks you normally perform manually will now be automated. Before we start, let me show you that everything is currently empty. We have this blank form ready for the user to fill out. It's live on the web, and an imaginary end user will fill it. We have this Telegram chat that is currently empty. We have this Google Sheet that has no entries yet, just the headers waiting for the data to be received. We have this HubSpot account, which is a CRM tool used to store and manage leads. I mean contacts we can tag and follow up on. We have no records here yet. And we also have a clean Google Tasks account. I created a task list called n8n follow-ups, and it's of course currently empty. I am showing you all this so you can see where we are starting from. We also have a couple more things like these two empty email accounts. One is an Outlook account that hasn't received any emails yet, and the Gmail account that's also currently empty. What are we going to do? Well, we are going to activate our workflow so you can witness the magic in action. Our workflow is waiting for something. It's waiting for someone to submit the form. So let's do that. I will enter here my name and my last name. I will also provide a fake phone number, the email address that I showed you from the Outlook inbox, which is student n8ncourse@outlook.com, and some simple comment like I love n8n. Now I am going to submit the form with this data and watch what happens in our workflow. Things begin to happen. You will see various nodes being triggered, one passing data to the next, a lot of movement here, this node that it seems like still working on something, and we seem to be done. What has just happened? It happened a lot. Without us having to do anything manually, the user just filled out the form, and then we received a Telegram message saying that a new user has been registered, showing their name, email, and country. In Google Sheets, that user has also been logged into our spreadsheet. In HubSpot, the same user has been added to our lead manager. A new task has been created in Google Tasks saying follow up and the name of the user. It includes the email, the phone, and some due date for tomorrow, it seems. If we check the Outlook inbox, there is a welcome email. This is the same email address that the user entered in the form, and now they've received a message greeting them, thanking them for completing the form, and summarizing their data. In the Gmail inbox, nothing has arrived yet, but we will get to that later. The point is that the user simply submitted the form, and we didn't have to do anything manually for all this to happen. Their information was validated, normalized, and various delays were triggered to enable subsequent steps. And we are not done yet, because there's still a second workflow, one scheduled to run once per day. It doesn't matter how many users submit the forms, one every day or 50. Once per day, this workflow will send an email to our team with a summary of the day's new registrations. I will manually activate that workflow right now, since it's set to run daily at 8 a.m., but by manually executing it, everything gets triggered, and now we see an email has arrived in the Gmail inbox that I prepared for that purpose. This is the email that our team will receive, with the subject line saying daily contact summary and the date. And if I open this email, it says, "Hello team," a small greeting, and then the summary information of today's registrations. So far there's only one user, but if 50 users has registered, the list would include all 50. And that's just a small taste of what n8n can do for you. It can do this and so much more with even greater detail and specialization. We will explore all this throughout this course, and in the next lessons we will start diving into its basic structure, how nodes work, how they connect, and how they are configured. And we will be building tons of workflows together that will save you so much time and energy in the future. I am sure you want to be part of the n8n world, so I will see you in the next lesson. Although it exists an installable version of n8n, in this course we are going to work with the cloud version, that is, the online version in the cloud, which is the simplest way to get started and doesn't require you to install anything or configure any servers. The first step to create your account is to go to n8n.io in your browser and then click the button Get Started for free. Clicking here will take you to the page where you can set up your account, and I'm going to enter my information, you will enter yours, and I will see you in a few seconds. Once you have finished entering your information and maybe answered a few statistical questions, you will land on your initial dashboard. Of course, this may look different by the time you take this course because cloud-based platforms constantly change their layout and design, but what matters is that you will find everything that I am showing you, maybe in different places or with different colors or styles, and if anything changes drastically, we will update these lessons. We are not going to stop now to explore all the details of this part of the platform, which is basically your home dashboard where you will find the statistic and main tools, because we want to focus for now on what really matters, learning the essentials and diving into the details later. As I was saying, this is your main dashboard. From here, you will be able to access all your workflows, although at the beginning you won't see any one of those workflows, you won't have any yet, so you'll see it just like I do, an empty dashboard. It is important to understand that in n8n, we are going to create workflows. And I will explain in a second what a workflow is, but so far I just want you to understand that a workflow is the thing that we are going to create here. And of course, the first time that you enter this dashboard, you won't have any previous projects or any previous workflows to continue working on. So how do we create our first workflow? Well, we can do it in two ways. We can go up here to create workflow, or you can use this Add Project button that you have here. What's the difference between a workflow and a project? The difference is that a project contains many workflows, meaning that the project is a broader category, although there can be standalone workflows that don't belong to any project, but it's always better to create a project and then create your workflows inside of it. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I will click in Add Project here, and I will give it a name, since I have this option to configure it here, and I will call it my first project. That's a nice name for my first project. You can name it however you like, of course. And you can also choose an icon here, which I will choose, I don't know, this little bulb, which reminds me the concept of idea. I will let it there, and that is how it will look from the outside. My project is now configured. As you can see, a project has 4 sections up here. The first one is workflows, which is from where you will be able to create new workflows or access the ones that you have already created within your project. Then you have credentials. Here is where you have the access credentials that will let you connect your project with different services. Services where you need access keys or authentication data to log in. Okay, that kind of credentials. For example, you may need credentials for Gmail, Telegram, WhatsApp, Airbnb, or any other cloud application or service that you want to integrate into your workflows. Right now, of course, we don't have any, but once we do, you will see them here. The third place here is executions. This tab simply allows you to see all records of every execution of your workflows that you made in the future. Don't worry too much about this yet. It will make plenty much more sense once we start working on this. And finally, project settings. This is where we were a moment ago, where we not only set the name and the icon of the project, but also where you can add a project description. You can call other members to work with you in this same project. For now, it's just me, Federico Garay, and I am listed as the owner of this project. But if someday you want to work in a team, this is the section where you will add your collaborators. And further down, you will see the most dangerous zone, the most sensitive one, which is where you can delete a project. So be very careful with that. Now you know the structure of the n8n platform, and in the next lesson, we will create our first workflow. Here we are, still inside our first project, and now we are going to create our first workflow. To do that, we go to this workflow section that we have here, when n8n is welcoming me and offer me to create my first workflow from scratch. So I will hit this button, and it takes me right into my first workflow, which, as you can see, the first time that you access it, it's just some kind of blank canvas. Actually, we will refer to it as the canvas, which is the space where we are going to draw our workflows. And here is where we are going to start adding elements which are called nodes, which, as you saw in the initial example, can either be a certain calls to specific applications to make them do something, or actions that connect those applications and trigger things to happen between them. As you can see, the first thing that n8n asks us to add here is a first step. And that first step is something called a trigger. So we need to define what event or what action will act as the kickoff for the entire workflow to run. So let's do a super quick test, creating a very simple workflow that will serve as an example for you to start understanding how all this works. If you want to add a trigger, or any node actually, in your workflow, you can do it from this plus button that you have here in the right up corner, or also with this big plus button that you have here that only appears at the beginning when there's nothing in your canvas. So I will click here, and it asks what triggers this workflow. A trigger is a step that starts your workflow. Here we have some basic options. Basically, we have a manual trigger, which means something that you can activate yourself by clicking on it. We have this on-app event, which, for example, if a new email arrives in Gmail, that can trigger the workflow or any other kind of event that you set up. On a schedule, meaning based on time, you can set the day, the hour, or any specific moment when the workflow should start running. On webhook call, which we will explore certainly in the next lessons, it's triggered, for example, when someone does something like submitting a form, that will trigger our workflow with this kind of webhook. On form submission also works specifically with forms. When executed by another workflow, this is very interesting. It's meaning that a workflow can be triggered by another one. On chat message, this is clearly when a chat message is received or during a run evaluation or some other ways which we will explore further in the future in the course. For now, let's choose this on chat message, which means the workflow we're about to set up will start when someone sends a chat message inside n8n. When I click here, this window pops up. Don't worry about it for now, we will understand it soon, but it's simply for configuring the node that we have just added. For now, I will close it by clicking outside this window, and now we can see that our workflow already has its first element, which basically is a chat that opens if we click this open chat button here, and down here we have this message input box to start chatting. Next to it, we see these logs where is nothing to display yet. Of course, we didn't text anything yet, and we can also hide this chat if we want. Note also that the name of this node is when chat message received, which means that this workflow that we are all going to create here will run for every message that comes into this chat. And also notice that to the right side of this trigger, we will see a line with a plus symbol. This is called a connector. It's the line that will connect to the next element or the next node that should be triggered once this trigger is executed. You can click and drag this node all around, and also if you float over it, you will see some symbols here. The first one is to run this node or execute this step. The next one is to delete or disable this node. The next one is to deactivate it. The next one is to delete it. And finally, we have these three little dots with a lot more options that we will see further in the course. And are the same options that you will get if you right-click over the node or trigger. Let me pay some attention now to this rename option that if we click on it, you can change the name of this trigger that I am not going to change right now. What I want you to notice is the important thing, that is we now have our first trigger, and in the next lesson we're going to start adding more nodes to this connector so we can configure our first workflow. So now we have our first trigger, which is a chat, and every time it receives a message, it will activate the sequence of nodes that are part of our workflow. My goal for this first project is to create a very simple workflow that will read the message received by our chat and check whether the message includes the word hello. If it does, it will say good morning, and if it doesn't, it will say, aren't you going to greet me? Basically, it's a workflow that behaves according to the information that it receives. So let's start by connecting more nodes to our workflow to implement that logic. Since we already have this chat from which the message will enter, now we need to connect it to a new node that will decide which path to take depending on the content of the message. This node that we're going to add should be able to evaluate a condition, which in your case will be, does this message contains the word hello or not? And based on that, it will make a decision. To connect this initial node to the second node I want to add, you can do it in different ways, of course, as always, but the most common one is to click this plus button that you have next to the node or the trigger, and this opens again this panel on the right where now we can choose the next node from a list of available options grouped into different categories that you can see all here. Although you could browse category by category until you find what you are looking for, in practice, since there are thousands and thousands of possible nodes, the most common way is to search for them using the search bar on the top. In this case, I am going to search for a node called if. So I write AF, and this stands for conditional if, the if that we use when we say If something happens, do this. If it doesn't, do something else. As you can see, there are several options that include the word if. The first one is the one that we want, which says route items to different branches, true or false. So this if node will check if a condition is true or false and routes the workflow accordingly. So we click on if, and as you can see, this large window appears, which is used to configure the behavior of this or every node that you open. And this window is very important because every node will have something very similar, and this is where we will set parameters so that the node behaves exactly the way we need. Of course, we will configure this, but for now I will close this window by clicking outside just to show you what the if node looks like in our workflow. Notice that this is a node that receives information from the chat trigger through this connector line linking them. But unlike other nodes, the if node doesn't have just one output, it has two. One labeled true for when the condition being evaluated is true, and one labeled false for when the condition, of course, is false. This means that we will connect more nodes to this if node depending on what we want to happen if the condition is met or not. We said that what we want is to check if the chat message contains hello. So that will be the condition that we are going to ask this node to evaluate. If that condition is true, the flow will continue through this top connector, and if it's false, meaning that the message doesn't include hello, it will continue through this false connector. Of course, you can also move these nodes wherever you want in the workflow, and if you hold the space bar to move the whole flow, you can center everything and organize it to your liking. Just like we did with the chat node, we can also rename this if node. We can do it again through this rename option. I will do it. I will rename this check if message says hello, and that's it. And now that we renamed it, you can see that our flow is very clear. When chat message received, check if message says hello. This is what our workflow should do right now. You don't need actually to change the names. They don't affect the functionality, but for clarity's sake, it's a good idea to give your nodes names that explain what each one does. Now that you have seen what this node looks like visually, let's open this configuration window again by double clicking on it, and let me show you what we have here. As you will see, when we work with different types of nodes, each one will have a particular configuration window with slightly different structures or parameters, but in general, they will follow this same layout, which is an input section on the left, a parameters and settings section in the center, and an output section on the right. What does this mean? It means that the data comes into this node from the input side, and then after it's processed by the settings and parameters of the node, it outputs to the next node all the data for it to use it. And this is really important because workflows are essentially flows of information that move from one node to another. The trigger at the beginning sends information to the next node. That means that the trigger has an output. You can see it if I open here. The trigger doesn't have an input layout, but it has this output window with the information that will send to the next node, and we can go to the next node right by here. Here we are. Here we will have the information that the trigger is sending to us, or the previous node in other cases, and it will process it and send it to the next node if there is one via this output part of the window. Now that we understand what an input, a configuration, and an output means, in the next lesson we're going to learn how to configure these nodes' properties so that our if node behaves exactly as we want it to. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to configure the if node, and at the same time, we will learn how its configuration windows are structured in general. So let's open again the if node configuration window again, and as I mentioned, on the left, we have this input data, which is the information that this node receives from the previous node. In the center, we have the settings, where we determine how the if node will behave, and on the right, we have the output data, the information that this node will pass on to the next node in the workflow. As you may have noticed, at this point, we don't yet have any input data, and that's because we haven't triggered anything yet, so the chat hasn't emitted any information that this node will receive. To make this demonstration clearer, I am going to go back to the chat. Let's click on Open Chat to bring up this window, and I will send a chat message that intentionally includes the word hello. Why don't we write the classic hello word salutation and hit enter? As you can see, several things has happened, but basically we now see a table here that contains the data emitted by our chat. In other words, its output. And it not only emits a chat input with the text that we write here, this hello world, but also a session ID with this number here, which is a unique key identifying the message, and also an action key, which is categorized as send message. These three values make up all the input being sent from the chat to the next element. And we are seeing this in this table format, but we can see it in two other different formats. In the first one, if we click here, is some kind of schema with tags, but it's actually the same information. This little a here, it describes that this information will be a string, which is a text data type. It could be also a number or a boolean. We will see this later. And you can also see this in the format of a JSON file or JSON code, which I will explain later because it's important for you to understand what is JSON in n8n. But now let's go back and reopen the if node configuration window, and now we can see that we do have input information based on the message that we just sent. The input provides these three keys: session ID, action, and chat input, that we can see in this table format, in the JSON format, or in the schema is the same that we saw before. But we also have some extra information, these variables and context. If we click on them, you can see a lot more information related to something that we didn't do, but the system captured, which is the information of the time where the message was sent, information about its execution, and information about the actual workflow where we are working on. And now let's focus again on this setting window. You can actually also resize these windows to have the space that you need for every part of the window, and this is where we are going to define the conditions that will be evaluated to determine what the output will be. And here we have boxes to set the first condition, and if we want also we can add more conditions, but I won't do this now. And in this case, I told you that I just want to check if the message contains the word hello. So under value 1, I will drag this chat input, which is the information that I want to evaluate, which is the message that the user has sent throughout the chat. And as you can see, once I dropped it here, it was transformed into some kind of code snippet. And you don't need to understand the syntax, just know that it's pulling the content of the chat input value, which always contains the message sent from the chat. And as you can see, n8n automatically transforms the chat input tag into a coding expression, because behind the curtain, what n8n is reading here, it's actually an item called chat input that is hosted inside this JSON element. What is the JSON element? Is all the code that we have here between these braces, that it always contains information structured in this way, which is a key with a value. We have three keys here with a value each one. So when we tell n8n to read the value that belongs to JSON.chat input here, then n8n will say, oh, you mean the value, which is hello world, that the key chat input has inside this JSON element. In this case, you mean the hello world expression that the user sent in the chat when it triggered this workflow. So if the chat message were a different one, like my name is Fede, then that will be the value of the key chat input inside this JSON. And before we go on, I want you to notice that this reference to JSON.chat input is inside these curly braces because that's how you write JavaScript code, as you can see in this text down here. But don't worry, you just need to know that JavaScript is a programming language and n8n uses JavaScript to code all this behind the curtain. But don't need to know JavaScript so far. So let's move on. We already have decided that we want to do something with the value of this chat input, and next we will choose what we want to evaluate. When you click here, this next window, you can choose the data type that you are going to evaluate. In this case, the chat input contains a string, which is a text. Check that if you go to the schema, we see that the chat input, it has this A symbol, which means that it is text, that it is a string. So we're going to check something for this chat input inside the string options to check what we want to set as a condition. And among the options for evaluating strings, we have things like exist or does not exist, it's empty or it's not empty, it's equal to, etc. Many options. But the one that we want to use right now is this option contains. We want to check if the chat input value contains what? The word hello. And here we can complete this condition with the value that we want to check. What do we want to check? What information. And you can already see that you have a check sign here because it says this condition is true for the first input item, for the item that we have here right now. If the user would have sent another message without the hello world, here we will have an X saying that it is not true, it is actually false. And if we execute this step, you can see now these two branches, the false branch and the true branch that contains one item. And you see that the false branch is empty because since the condition evaluated here is true, because the message does contains hello, therefore it's the true connector, the true branch that is activated and will pass on this output data to the next node only in the true branch. We can close this window now and actually see that these two connectors has different colors. The green one is where this workflow is wanting to continue. Of course, we don't have another node here, but here is where this workflow will keep going on. Let's add two nodes, one for each connector here. In the first one, we will add something called set. Set means a node for editing fields. It just modifies the information that receives and transform it into something different, but we are going to use it right now just to do something with this general purpose node. I am just going to rename it. I can also do it here in the setting window saying positive result, and just that. Let's close it and let's create another one here, another set node, which we will call in the edit fields negative result. And there you go, you have these two set nodes with positive and negative result. They don't do nothing, but just they exist to show you how you can continue your workflow depending on this evaluation that the if node uses as a condition. So now we have two outputs, this positive and this negative, and let's go back and send another message now, but this time one that doesn't say hello in the text. So let's go to the chat input here and let's say something like today is Monday, which is true for me, I will send this message. And as you can see, now we have this information in the chat input, and the workflow did follow this path to the if node, but then it kept flowing through this false branch to this negative result, which now has this check mark because the workflow will follow in this branch. If we open this node, we can see that now the false branch is the one that has the information and the true branch has nothing. Let's go for another message saying this time hello Fede, which is my name. This changes everything again, and now the workflow goes back again in the positive result. This was a very basic demonstration of how a simple workflow behaves, but there's so much more to explore, and I promise you are going to enjoy it. So let's move on to the next lesson and keep expanding our understanding of workflows in n8n. And now that you have learned the basic of how to create a workflow, you become familiar with the elements that compose it, the nodes and the connectors. You have learned how to connect nodes together and configure some basic settings for each node. But before we move on to more complex stuff, I want us to take some time to better understand the n8n platform so we can make better use of its resources. This platform is basically structured in three main parts. We have a left sidebar where you will find general options, not related to a specific project, but more about your overall account and how you manage resources in n8n. Here you will find a list of projects, and at the moment we have only one, and at the top we have this overview, which is the area where you use to view your general dashboard. But if I want to go now, you will see that it's telling me that I need to save my project before leaving. I won't save it here, just to show you that you can also save it with this button right now, and now you can go to this overview dashboard. We saw this dashboard before, but it didn't have any workflow back then. Now we have this first workflow that we were working on minutes ago. Then we have this credentials section where you can see all the information for authentication on those external apps that require credential or passwords, like, I don't know, Gmail, WhatsApp, Telegram, or any kind of application that to connect with it, it will need your personal ways to go inside. Then we have these executions in which we can see the testing that we have performed while working on the workflow minutes ago. Here you will find more info if you want to check any one of these executions. Here I am opening it, and you can see for every execution you have how it went, what it happened. You can check the info that you have in the input and the output. This is not editable. You cannot edit anything here because it's a picture of the past. Is what happened when we make this execution back then in the previous lesson. I will close it, and this is how you can revisit the previous executions to investigate what happened on every one of them. In this personal section, down here the overview, you can click here and you see a very similar structure, but it's organized not in terms of the project, but in terms of the workflow levels. Because also remember that some workflows may even exist outside any project. In Shared With You, if you go here, you might find workflows that were created by someone else who has shared them with you via those collaboration tools. We have nothing yet, also the credentials for those projects of collaboration. And again, back to my projects where we were seeing these options. For now, I have only one project, which is my first project, and it has only one workflow, which is the one that we were working in the past lectures. And below here, we can see some really useful tools. Let's go through them from top to bottom. Admin panel contains your account's personal data, so I won't open it here because my personal data is there. Then we have the templates. Here we will explore this later. You will love them because these are pre-built workflow templates that help you work much faster for different cases. Then we have variables. This section includes any variables that you have created to better manage input and output data. We will understand this better soon. Then the insight section, where it shows usage stats for your workflows once they are live. And finally, help with a whole help center that includes documentation, tutorials, a discussion forum, a course with basic lessons, a book report form, and more info about n8n. At the bottom, you will see your name and some additional options to configure your n8n account. Now let's go back to my overview here. Let's re-enter the project and the workflow where we were working, and let's see this bar in the upper side of the screen. Here you see the name of the project where I am working right now, and then the workflow that belongs to this project. So you can recognize easily where you are. Also, you can add tags to your projects or to your workflows to categorize them. Workflows can be stored under different tags. I don't have any yet, but if you want to create your own, you could categorize them into, I don't know, games, communication, business, or whatever, any other group that suits your needs and helps you group your workflows in different topics or things. Then we have this toggle button that it's inactive now, and if you switch it, it will activate the workflow once it's ready to go live. Then you have this share button to share it with others, and then the save button that we used minutes ago. You can also check the version history to preview all the versions of your workflow. So usually we stick with the latest one. And finally, these other options like duplicate the workflows, download it, change the owner, rename it, and you can also import workflows directly from a URL or from a file. We are going to learn that this is very useful, and we're going to use it in a couple sections ahead. And then you have these general settings that we saw before. Finally, inside the canvas, I want to show you a few more things. You can delete connectors if you want. By clicking this trash can icon here, you delete the connector and you can reuse it on another node if you want, but I will connect it again. And you can also insert nodes between two existing ones. If I click the plus button, I can add another node that will appear here in the middle. Also, you have these navigation tools. You have the zoom out, the zoom in, you have this zoom to fit to adjust it to the screen. And if the things are messed up, you can click this tidy up button that will put everything aligned again. It's very helpful to organize your workflow very fast. Finally, we have this button here for AI powered features, which is going to blow your mind, but for now we still have a lot to learn before diving into this. So let's move on to the next lesson and start making our workflows more complex. In the previous section, we managed to create this small workflow to understand the dynamics of a workflow in n8n. But for now, it's a closed flow. That means that the data enters the platform through this n8n chat, but it doesn't go anywhere. It just chooses a path within the flow. In this section, we're going to build a workflow that is connected to real life. That is, it will receive information from a form on the internet and will end up recording that information into a Google Sheets spreadsheet also online. So let's do that by going back into our project, my first project. Let's save this again, but this time creating a new workflow within the same project so we can work with a fresh blank canvas. In this first lection, we will take care of the first step of this new workflow, creating the trigger. And this time it won't be like the last time a chat message. This time it will be a on webhook call. So let's choose that one. A webhook literally will be a hook on the web because it essentially hooks us into the internet. This trigger activates when it receives something called an HTTP request, and I will explain you that in a minute. In this configuration panel is where we are going to work on right now. As I said, a webhook is essentially a URL, and you can see here that we have a URL. Here, n8n provides us with a URL that we can use to connect with a service that will send us data, information. Of course, we can also customize this URL to make it more descriptive, something that better fits what we are doing. But before, I am going to exit momentarily to show you how the trigger looks graphically. This trigger will run when we click this button, this execute workflow button, and the trigger will start waiting, as you can see, for a trigger event. It will be waiting to receive information from an external service which will send data to the URL that we just saw. In short, this workflow will only run when it receives external input. That will be the trigger, the detonation of this workflow. So let's stop this and let's reopen this node to configure the options and start setting up these webhook settings. The first option you can see here is method, and here you can choose between a couple methods, but the most common are get and post. Get is, of course, to retrieve, and post is, of course, to send. And here I will choose post because even though I will be receiving information, the request made by the external service, which will be the form, will be a post. It will be posting data to us. Then we have this path text box where we can rename the actual name of our URL, because if you see, these numbers and letters that we have here are the same that we have here. So we can change this to a more meaningful name, like, for example, request from form. As you see, as I am typing here, it is changing here the final part of this URL that we have for the post method in this HTTP request that we are creating. Now we have something more cleaner and more descriptive of what we are doing here. But let's keep going, and now to these authentication options, but we will let this as it is in known. We will see later what is this, because since this will be a very open form that we will create ourselves, it doesn't require to any username, password, etc. No authentication will be needed. In the response section, we must decide when and how to respond to the webhook request. There are basically three options: immediately, which returns an OK right away, regardless of what happens in the flow. Use this only when you need a quick acknowledgement. Then we have when last node finishes, which responds only when the final node in the flow finishes running. This is the one that we are going to use since we want to return the result on the workflow as the webhook response. And finally, this using response to webhook node. We will learn about this one later when dealing with conditional flows or external APIs, but for now, let's select just this when last node finishes, so n8n will respond only after the workflow has finished. And that's what we want because we plan to record this data somewhere. Leave everything as is and then click on this listen for test event. This puts the webhook in listening mode, and we will now copy this URL that we have here. Is the same that we saw before in the settings part of the window. And now we can close this and see that our workflow is waiting for trigger event. It's yet not sending anything to the connector because it's waiting for something to happen in the URL that it has provided us. So it hasn't yet received any post request to that URL, and that's what we'll configure next. For testing purposes, we are not going to use a form just yet. We are going to use a service called Postman. Maybe you know it, maybe not, but I will guide you. Postman is a service used to send HTTP requests to specific addresses. So that's what we're needing here now, someone that sends us something through the URL that we have created. So I'm going to go to Postman, just finding it on Google. I will wait for postman.com to open. If you don't find the same result, please go to postman.com. If you don't have a Postman account, please create it. You will need it to do what we're going to do. It's free, of course. And then you will see a dashboard where you will select My Workspace. This, of course, it won't be a full tutorial on Postman. The only purpose here is to test a request and see if our URL receives it. So follow along, and I'm going to click this overview out and open a new request with this plus button here. I will choose a post method here. Check that are the same methods that we have on our trigger. So let's choose post, and here I am going to paste the URL that I just copied from my webhook. Also, a few settings are required here. In headers, please make sure that the key is content type, you will find it here, and that the value is application/JSON. This is necessary. And in the body part, select this raw option and make sure that JSON is here. And now we will send a very simple JSON message. As I told you, JSON uses curly braces and key value pairs. So I will send a message inside these curly braces. The only thing I will write here is between quotes, message, which is a key, and then colon, and also between quotes, hello from Postman. This is just for testing purposes, so you don't need to learn much more than this for Postman. That's the message that I am sending here in a JSON format to the URL where our workflow is waiting for something to happen. Again, don't worry about learning how to use Postman. This is only for testing purposes. Later, we will send real information from a web form, which is our real goal. Now, let's be sure that our workflow is listening. No, it has stopped listening, so let's click execute workflow again. Let's go to Postman and let's send this information. Let's go back to here, and you can see that the workflow executed successfully. It has received some info, and it has a check mark indicating that it received actual information. If I open this node, we can confirm that we have received a lot of data that now is shown in this table. The webhook is emitting output information to the next step, which is empty yet, but it's sending information, although we haven't added yet any other nodes to this workflow, but the trigger is now passing information forward. What matters to us here is that in the body we have a key called message that says hello from Postman, which is exactly the message that I have sent. So, congratulations for the first time we have built a workflow, still incomplete of course, but a workflow in the end that is capable of receiving information from the outside from an external event. In the next lesson, we are going to take the information that we have received via this webhook and record it in a Google Sheet spreadsheet in our drive. It will be our first connection between incoming data and publishing it somewhere in the real world. Let's move on to the next lesson. In the previous lesson, we have learned how to receive external data. We did it using a request from Postman, and now we're going to focus on inserting that data automatically into a Google Sheet spreadsheet. So the goal of this lesson is to build a flow where every time that someone sends a message via a request containing a key that is named message, that text gets saved automatically in a new row in our Google Sheet spreadsheet. To do that, we first need, of course, to create our Google Sheet, and to do that, we are going to go to sheet.new, and this will automatically send you to a new blank spreadsheet in your drive. Make sure that you are signed into your Google account to access to this service. You will need it. And I will name this sheet with a different name, which will be my n8n messages. And I will also rename this first sheet that is called sheet 1 so far, but I will name it like message underscore list. With that, we have pre-configured our sheet to act as the destination where all the messages from HTTP request will be recorded. Before that, in cell A1, I will create a header, a column title called message, and this will be the header for the column that will store all the messages that are sent here row by row. So our sheet is ready. Now let's go back to n8n, where I want to add another node here that will take the information from the webhook's output and process it to send it to Google Sheets. As mentioned before, the best way to find node is using the search bar here, so I will type Google, and as you can see, we get several services provided by Google. This gives you a glimpse of how n8n supports thousands of nodes integrating with practically every major app out there. I will choose here Google Sheets, and then I have even more options, because within that I will select the node that is called append or update row in sheet. That's exactly what I want to do. The configuration window will pop up, but first I want to show you the visual layout because I love seeing this puzzle taking shape. We can see that the webhook is connected to the Google Sheet, but it has a warning sign here indicating that it's not fully configured. So let's reopen this configuration window, and we see that the input from this node contains all the data that we have received from the request, including actually, of course, the actual message that we sent from Postman. And now I need to tell this Google Sheet node where to put the information. First, I will need to select the account that I want to connect with, and here I need to send the credentials that are required to connect with my account of Google Sheets, because of course no one should be able to read or to write to your Google Sheets without your authorization. So we will create these new credentials, and I will log in my Google account by using this button, and you will do the same for you. I will do my part, you do yours, and I will see you in a moment. Once you are logged in, you should see your account listed as connected. You can now close this window, and now you can choose between create a new credential or to choose the actual credential that you have already set seconds before. Next is resource, which by default is already set to what we want, which is sheet within document. Then we have this operation where we choose append row, which is what we want to do. We want to add a new row. And now we need to select the exact document in your Google account where you want to store the data. I will open this, and you will see that it's fed with all the Google Sheets that you have in your drive. In my case, I will choose for the first one my n8n messages. And then you should choose the sheet within my n8n messages where you want to save in a row the message that you get. I will choose the sheet that I just renamed, which is message list, which is actually the only option available. We will leave this mapping column mode as map each column manually, and as you can see, this has detected that the only header that I have in my columns in my sheet is message. So what I will do, as the content of the row that will be included in this column, I want to put exactly this message that I get from the input information, which is immediately transformed, as you can see, in JavaScript code, which I explained you before. It's inside this message, which is inside this body, because you can see that message is inside this other tag, which is body, and everything is inside JSON, which is the whole element that we get here. This is how n8n reads it. Everything is configured, so I can now execute this step. Now we are getting the output information, which is only the message that say hello from Postman. If we look at our workflow, we can see now this check in the Google Sheets node. And if we go to the actual Google Sheet, we will see the first row completed here with hello from Postman. This is amazing. We did it. Our message is already sent from Postman and saved into this Google Sheet without us doing anything. And we can keep doing this. We can go to Postman again, send another different message like my second message. I will be sure that my webhook is listening. I will send this second message. I will go to Google Sheets, and in my sheet I have my second message already added here, and I could keep doing this, of course. Let me remind you that you can actually take not only the message that we have here, but also any other piece of information that you have here. For example, the date information of the message. So if I add another column here, like for example, date, and let's wait for this to save it. It's saved. If we go to my workflow, now you can see this little icon here that says that columns are outdated. Refresh to see the changes, because n8n, it has detected that I now have another new column that is not included in this setting. So I will refresh this. We will see that it's fetching columns and date has been included. Let's drag this now information, put it here, and if we execute this step and send another, let's say my third message, and send it, and you will see that after it's completed in the Google Sheet, we have this third message with the date that we pulled from the information that my workflow has provided in the input. So you can customize what information you want and where to store it, taking it from an HTTP request like the one we just sent, pathing it through your workflow like we have done here, and finally registering into a Google file or any other online document that you can connect to your workflow in n8n. That's all for now. We are just getting started, and the most exciting stuff is coming in the next lesson. Up to this point, we have successfully created a webhook that receives HTTP request, takes that information, sends it to Google Sheets, and records it there however you choose. What we are going to do in this lesson is take it one step further, because we're going to automate everything using a real web form that anyone can fill out without needing to use Postman like we did before. We will use a form service that sends data to the webhook, and the webhook will pass it to Google Sheets. To do this, we will create a web form using a service which is called typeform. You can write it like this, typeform.com, and you should need to create an account and log in to use your account of Typeform. I already have mine, so you are seeing my dashboard now. Of course, you can also use any other service that you like for creating forms, but I am going to choose Typeform for this example since it has native webhook support, which is compatible with n8n. This form, once created, can be shared via link so that anyone with access can fill it out and automatically trigger your workflow. So let's go to start working in Typeform. Remember, you will be using the free plan, that it will be more than enough for this testing, but if you want a larger number of requests, etc., and more services, you will need to choose for a paid plan, of course. So let's go to create a new form, since I doesn't have anyone yet. We have these three options. I will use the start from scratch one, where it let me choose which fields we want to include. I will keep it very simple, so I will choose just two inputs. The first, it will be short text for the name of the user. So here I can say what I want to ask to the user. Let's say your name, to put something that it's clear for the user to put their information in our form. And then we will add content here with the simple number field, where we can ask, for example, your age. And that's enough. We have already set up a very simple form for our users. But now we need to tell it to the form, where does it have to send the data? We want to send it to the same URL that we were using before with Postman. Now it will not be Postman, the one sending request, it will be type form. And how do we do that? Well, you will see that up here you have three sections, which are content, workflow, and connect. In connect is where we will find how can we set up web hooks. So let's choose this one, and here we can trigger web hooks. Let's add a webhook. It asks for an endpoint, so we'll send your webhook to this URL. Let's paste our URL here, say webhook, and it's already created, but so far it's not active because we need to toggle this button here. And now we just need to share our form so anyone online can use it. Okay, it has been created. So let's open this link in another browser so we can see the live version of our form, the one any user can see if we share this link. But before I fill out this form, I want to be sure that my workflow is hearing. So let's prepare this. Let's go again to the workflow. I will say Federico, which is my name. Okay. I will say my age, which is 49. Let's confess. Let's submit. And now my form has been sent. And now if we go to the Google Sheet, you will expect maybe that our information is there, but it's not. We have here this empty cell with data, which is the info about when I send this actual form. But why the information is not here? Certainly because our Google Sheet node is not set up correctly for this form. It has only a setting for a message and for a date. The date went fine because this form is sending meta information, which includes the data where I send it, but it doesn't have any message field. So, of course, the data that we have sent and that we have here in the input is this, you can see, text that says Federico, which is inside answers, is not anymore inside JSON body message, etc. It's a different path, so I need to adjust my settings for this append row in sheet node to make it adapted to my actual information. Let's do that in the next lesson. We are now receiving data from a public form throughout our webhook, which receives that information and sends it as an output to the next node, which is Google Sheets. However, Google Sheets doesn't know what to do with this data because the fields are currently configured to handle the message that we set before when we were sending messages through Postman. But now our form has a different kind of information. It has this field for the name, which is text, and this field for age, which is number. And this setup is not processing that, certainly. But first, we also need to adjust our Google Sheet to get adapted to what are we looking for now. I am going to clean all this information, and the new headers will be name and will be age. That's the information that I want to catch when the user sends info throughout the form. So now that I changed the headers here, I can see this icon telling me that the columns are outdated. So I refresh this, and you can see now that I have these two fields for name and age, exactly the columns that I created here. Let's do that. Let's give what kind of tag we want to put here in these fields. For name, we want this text that when I left here, you see that it changes again to an expression, a coding expression that says that the information that contains the value of name is inside the element JSON, which is everything that we have here. Then inside the body, you can see that inside body here is where you have more information. There you have form response. Form response, it's here, and inside form response it answers, which is answers. Where are you? More down here. Answers. And the first case, that's this 0 between brackets, is text. Text is where the information, the actual value, is stored. So there is some little coding here to understand, but you cannot understand it, no problem. You just drag this tag from the schema, which is again the text. You left it here and you have all the information. Let's do the same for age. Let's drag number inside here and you have the piece of code that represents the information that you need. So now let's execute this step and you will see that this information is what this node is outputting. Just the name, which is Federico, and the age, which is 49, but these values will change every time any user sends a new form with new information. The schema looks like this, or the JSON looks like this. And if we go to my n8n message, which is my Google Sheet, you find Federico and 49 already added here. Let's try again. Let's put this workflow to here. If an event occurs, then we go to this form. I will refresh it to send more info again. I will ask, I don't know, Mary, and she's 25, let's say. Let's submit this, and without watching the workflow, I will go directly to Google Sheets to see that Mary has been already added here. So this is working automatically. I didn't need to do nothing in my workflow. Of course, you notice that for every case I have to execute the workflow, but this is because we are still in the testing or development stage. When we finish this workflow and we activate it with this button, you don't need to come here anymore. For every time that a user sends information from this form, it will end up added in the Google Sheets automatically. That's the magic of n8n. This very basic workflow already receives data from an external source, processes it, and sends it to a public service like Google Sheets. What we are going to do in the next lesson, as the final step of this small form data registration demo, is to add a new node that will check a condition to decide whether or not to register that information. See you in the next lesson. So far, our workflow has completed a full cycle of receiving information and sending it out. But to make things a bit more interesting, we are now going to make the workflow do something in between. Specifically, we will check whether the incoming information meets a condition, and only then we will allow it to reach the next node. To insert intermediate nodes, we can click on this connector that we have in the middle and choose either to delete it or either to add another node. If I click here, I can now choose from the options here an if node again, a node that will allow me to make decisions whether a condition is met or not. And as you can see, now we have this new node in between these two previous nodes. Let's fit this in the screen and notice that now the Google Sheet has this little icon here saying because of changes in the workflow, output data might change when this node is run again. This is because this node is expecting certain information to do its work, and maybe this change has altered the way the information it will be coming here. So that's why this warning. So let's open this if node again and use it for the reason that I have decided to include it, which is checking if the user is 18 or older to be included in our Google Sheet. So I will set a condition here where the value that I want to check is based on the age value that we will reserve here in this number. So I can throw this here. I can say that I will make a comparison based on a number. Now we are not using a string option, we are using a number, and I want to check if the number that the user will provide is greater than or equal to what? To 18. Here you just hard script the number that you want to set up as the condition. And as you can see, since the actual case that we have here is Mary with 25 years, it's checked as positive. So if we execute this step, we can see the information that has been passed as an output to the true branch and nothing to the false branch. So if we go again to the workflow, you can see the green line in the true branch of our if. And just to show you something else, you can keep adding conditions. Let's say that you want only people between 18 and 60 years old. Then you have this new condition where you set and, because you want both conditions to be met, not or, which will be this or this, and only with one condition met, you will pass this case in the true branch. But no, we want and, so both conditions has to be met. And here we can also again choose to drag the number information, check if in the number section is less than or equal to 60. So we are setting two limits to be included this case in our spreadsheet. Since this user, which is married with 25, it meets both conditions, when we execute this step, she is still in the branch true. But if we set a different case, let's say that we refresh this form, also we will put this trigger to here, and let's say now Leandro is my second name. Let's confess another personal data, and let's say that I am 16, just to check if this works or not. If we go now to the Google Sheet, we don't see Leandro here, and we don't see him because in the n8n case, we can see that this case went directly to the false branch. Notice that now the true branch is empty and all the information that was processed here was sent as an output only to the false branch, because that's what our node does here. Let's try one final test. Let's execute the workflow. Let's refresh the form. Let's say a name like, I don't know, Homer Simpson. Let's imagine that Homer is 44, I guess, is close to that. Let's submit, and we can see in the spreadsheet that Homer Simpson has been automatically included from this form in the real life internet to this real Google spreadsheet in my drive. This has been a complete process of receiving data, processing it, and based on that processing, taking action. In this case, recording the result in a spreadsheet. We are making great progress, and there's still so much more to explore in n8n, so I will see you in the next lesson. After learning quite a lot about how nodes, connectors, triggers, and all the different configuration options in n8n work, now we are ready to build a full project on our own, one that closely resembles how things will function in the real world. In this section, we are going to create this workflow step by step, the same one we briefly demonstrated earlier in the course, where I showed you a glimpse of what you can achieve with the magic of n8n. This workflow is designed to start with this webhook node that will receive information whenever a user submits a web form that we have created for this purpose. Then the data will be normalized, meaning that we'll standardize the naming of the labels that we use throughout the workflow so that everything stays consistent. Then we will split this path into two branches so that different parts of the process can run in parallel without interfering with or delaying each other. On the first branch, we will enrich the submitted information using additional data pulled from the user's IP address, because when the user submits the form, they will provide their IP address by default, and thanks to an app that can process geolocalization data based on that IP, we will be able to gather more information than what the user provides manually. This way, we will know their location at the time of submitting the form, and we will send ourselves that info throughout a Telegram message using a special node for that. At the same time, another sub-branch will be launched that will check if the user is in Europe or not, and depending on that, it will register their info in HubSpot with a special tag identifying if they belong to Europe or not, and after that, it will create a follow-up task for that user in Google Tasks, including a due date. That's the first branch. The second branch will register the user's information in a Google Sheet, and after that, it will wait for a few seconds. And this delay it's only for demonstration purposes, to show you that you can easily add pauses when needed, which is something that you might actually need in real-world workflows depending on timing or dependencies. So we've got one branch that runs without delay and another that includes a pause. After that, we will send a welcome email to the user. You already know how to do that. And later on, even if you want, you could even begin a full email sequence with days or weeks between messages, etc. Once this second brand finishes, all the path will end up in the same final node, which is a special piece of workflow that will send a response to the initial webhook with all the information related to how the workflow went along the way. And that closes the process. That's where the main workflow ends. But as you see, there's also a parallel workflow that uses a trigger that is not based on an action or event, but instead on a specific time or date. That's what the schedule trigger is for. We will set it up to run once per day. Time it runs, it will read all the entries stored in the Google Sheet. Then it will filter the data using a code node to keep only the entries from today. And next, it will check whether the resulting dataset is empty or not. If it's not empty, that means that we had new submissions that day, and we will format them into a table and send them to our team by email so that every day at a specific time they receive a summary of the users who registered via this form. This workflow is very similar to many real-world automations. It might look quite complex, but I promise, little by little, lesson by lesson, we are going to build it together. Are you excited to do it? I sure am, so I will see you in the next lesson. Now we are ready to take the first step in creating our full workflow. I have already created a new workflow here and named it Process Submissions. Of course, you can name yours however you like. And the first step, it will be to decide which trigger will we use, which will be an on webhook call, because we will need also a webhook to receive information that will be sent from a form service. The webhook is how the form will send us data. We will set this HTTP method to post again because the form will be sending information, and also in the path we will prefer to use a more descriptive name like submission form. And now we have this URL more descriptive. On respond, we will use again when last node finishes, and that's all we need to configure on the webhook so far. So I am copying this URL to use it in the form that I'm going to create. And for this, I am going to use a service called Tally, tally.so. You can use any service you want to create your form, to publish it on a website. However, I just want to show you different services so you can see how flexible is n8n and how many services can be connected with it, no matter what kind of service you prefer to use. Here I am using Tally because it's free, because it offers connection to webhooks. So I will create a very fast form using this new form button. Of course, you have to create your account first to be here, and you can design your form manually, or you can create something from a template. I think I would use that option, use a template. A lot of examples, of course, but I will use something very simple like this contact form. Maybe is the right one for me because it has, yes, first name, last name, phone number, email, and text area for something. Let's use this template. So our form is ready. We don't have to do anything else. And we need to publish it to get a link to share this, this form, so anyone can put their information there. We can copy this link here. But before, we need to make the integrations, which means creating a webhook to connect this form with our webhook on n8n. So let's go to integrations. Here you can see that you have a lot of integrations to implement here, but we will choose webhooks, which is the one we need. Now here we will paste the URL of our webhook in n8n, so the connection, it has been made. Be sure that the active toggle button here is on. Once you did this, you can of course now go to the actual link to see this form live. Here it is. Let's do some testing, executing this workflow so it's ready to receive information. And here let's say Luca, last name Smith, phone number. Okay, I will use a fake one and also a fake email like luca@mail.com, for example, and hello in the text area. Let's submit this. Oh, the phone is not valid, of course. I will put my real phone number then, but I will keep it hidden because I don't want to share personal information. And now the form has been sent. In n8n, you can see that the webhook is marked on green because information has come inside here. If I open this webhook, now we have some output information here that we are seeing in the JSON format. We can check it on a schema maybe to see it more clear, and we have all the information sent here, including the personal information that I have set here, which is the name Luca, this other field for Smith, this other field for my phone number, which is hidden, and these two other fields for luca@gmail.com and the hello message that I sent. So all the information that we set on a real form online, it is already in n8n to be sent to the next webhook. What I want to highlight here is that we have successfully set up the starting point of our workflow where no manual intervention is needed on our side, only that a user submits the form and our workflow will automatically capture and process the data. Let's move on to the next lesson. In this new lesson of the development of our complete workflow, we're going to go to the next step, which will be to validate the information that we get in this webhook. Because we get a lot of information here. We say that we have this email, this text area, this phone number, etc. But this information is inside tags that are not exactly the ways that we want to refer to this information later in our workflow. So the next step, it will be to create a new node that will process that information to standardize it, normalize it, let's say put it into the correct references to be able to call this information in the future. The kind of node that we will use for this is the set node that we have used before, and we will be taking the information into our fields and transform it into the thing that we want to create. For example, we have these two fields that are here. We have then the name and the last name, but we prefer to have the full name of our user. So let's create this tag full name, which will be a string, and then we will set here first the name, which is transformed into this kind of, snippet of code. Then we put a space after it, and then we call this last name that we have here, and we put it after the space. This way you can create a combinated value, a concatenation, because these two values can create a single string. Let me check. If we execute this step, we have the full name field now with Luca space Smith well created. Then let's go to normalize the other field that we have to include later in the workflow. The next one is phone, which we have here in this phone number label. Let's drag it here and put it here. Don't worry about the number because I did change it after the last lesson, so it's not my real number. We have it here as another new field. Let's create another one for the email, because here we have it like email in the label. We want to use the email underscore address name for this label, just because, but let's say that we want to call it this way. That's why this edit fields node exists, to adapt the things to our likings. And then let's drag the email of the user, and let's create a final one for the message that the user sent. Here we say just hello. And just to show you also more information that we can pass as an output here, we can add another field that is not in the information that the user has given to us, but it is included in the full info of this JSON file that we are getting. For example, I want to have the information of the date of the message of the submitted form. So I will go down here to variables and context and choose the now information to put it here. Then we will see that we can format this even better, but so far we will execute this to see that now we have this information normalized in the way that we will use it later. Full name, phone, email address, message, and date. And of course, this node needs to be renamed. Let's give it the name normalize data, and let's keep it that way. Let's close it, and this is now the way our workflow is looking so far, with the output information normalized by this node for the next node that we will create in the next lesson. It's time to move on with our workflow, and let's create the next step in this process, which will be to register the information that we have normalized into a Google Sheet. For that, we will create a new Google Sheet. We have to go to sheets.new as we did before. You already know how to do this because we did it in the course already. Let's create this sheet as registered users. Let's close these tables, I don't need it. And here we were going to use headers with the same name that we used for the normalized information that we have. So let's say here full name, then we need a phone, which will be the phone number. Then let's put the email underscore address, and finally the message. But also we can include the date to also register here the moment where the information was sent. Also, let's rename this sheet. Let's put the name users, and we have the database for our information. Go back to n8n to create this time a Google node. Let's choose Google Sheets. Inside this, let's choose append or update row in sheet, and here we have this new node with all the input information that we need. Here you choose the account that you have already added your credentials in the last section. If you didn't, you can do it with create new credential. Then you choose here a sheet within a document. Then we choose append or update a row, but we can choose append row, maybe it's even better. And from list, we choose between all the sheets that you have in your drive, the last one, which is registered users, and within it, we can choose the only sheet that it has, which is users. Here, the system will identify the 5 column names that you have, and let's start dragging the full name here, the phone here, the email address here, the message, and finally the date in the last part of it. If we execute this, not only will show us the output information in a second, here it is, but also it will register this first user in our Google spreadsheet that we already had the information. Let's do another case. Now let's put this n8n workflow to listen. Let's create a new contact. Why not, I don't know, Sarah, the last name Lorraine, the phone number an invented one. Let's put this, and an email like sarah@gmail.com, and hello world as the message. Let's send this. Oh, the phone number is not valid. Let's try it again. Now it's accepted. Here we have this workflow working. The wheel has showing us that it was extracting the information and sending it to Google spreadsheet, and here you can see that Sarah Lorraine is also added in the Google spreadsheet. So we did another big step in order to keep our workflow growing out. Let's move to the next lesson where something great is going to happen. I see you there. At this point of the process, we get the information with our webhook, we normalize it, send it to the Google spreadsheet, and now we want to send an email to the user that gave us their information. Let's click here to add a new node. This one is called Send Email. If you choose this one, you have two options here. The one that I want is Send an Email. This is the window to set this node, but I want to show you how it looks like. It has this envelope icon, and it has this warning because of course it's still not set it up, so the credentials for send the email are not set, and the main parameters are still awaiting for information, which are from which email address sending the emails and to what email address. So let's open this again, and of course the first thing that you have to connect here is the credential for the email account that you are going to use. So let's create a new credential. I am going to use a special account that I created just for this course, which is test course n8n at gmail.com, and the password of course will remain hidden. Host. Here we have a lot of information that maybe it will confuse you how to fill these things up. But we have help here because we can do it with this Ask Assistant in case that you don't know which host, which port, etc. So let's go to the assistant, which will give us all the information or the guide that we need to fill out these fields in this form. It's looking for answers in the n8n community, up, down. Okay, it's thinking, ping pong, and the information will come here to help us identify how to fill this. You will always have this information at hand, made with AI to help you understand everything that you need to. Let's go for the user, of course, my email address, the password, of course, that's fine. Host. It says the SMTP server address, which, for example, for Gmail is this one. So it's easy for me because I just have to copy this, paste it here, and that's it. If you're using Outlook, it will be that one, SMTP, that one. But if you are using a different one, you should check with, I don't know, maybe ChatGPT or the information, the documentation of your email server. For port, it says that the common ports are this and this, etc. Check your provider's documentation. So to be sure, what I'm going to do is to copy this part, go to ChatGPT, paste this part, and then say in the prompt, this is what n8n is asking me to set the send email node dot what's the Gmail port. This is to get my port. You will say something different if you want to check for a different service. So I sent this, and ChatGPT, of course, will give me the exact information that I am looking for. It says that the port, it should be 465 in my case. 465 is what we have already here. About this SLTLS, also ChatGPT gives me information. It says that it has to be enabled. Okay. The client host name, it says here that it's only needed if your provider asks for it. So let's leave it empty and save. So now it's saying that couldn't connect with these settings. More details. Retry, maybe? No, retry has failed again. More details. And here gives me this information that I will also copy to ChatGPT, so it will tell me what's the problem here. And it says, the error you're seeing means Gmail is rejecting your login credentials, specifically this part. Okay, you're using your regular Gmail password instead of an app password. Okay, this means that we don't have to use our typical password to get into the email account, but we need a special password for apps. Here is even more clear. You cannot use your normal Gmail password. You must generate an app password for use in n8n. This will be different for you if you are using another service. In my case, I will visit my account, Google, etc., open link to solve this for my case. I will do this outside of the video. I see you in a couple seconds. And after creating a special password for this application, I paste this new password here, I save, and it's accepted. And now we can keep going on. We can close this. You will check that the operation is sent because that's what you want to do. And here the address from the email where we are going to send these emails, it will be test course n8n at gmail.com, or the email that you have created or that you are going to use for this. It may be maybe your personal email address. And the to email, it will be the email of the user. For testing purposes, I will use first another email that I have created, which is student n8n course at Outlook. This time I chooses a different one just to get the email in a different service and know not everything in Gmail. The subject here we can say, I don't know, welcome to my newsletter or something like that. And the HTML, it will be the format of the content of the email. Here you have to write the body of your email using the coding language HTML. And here you say, hey Fede, you told me that this course won't use coding almost at all. So yes, we are not writing code ourselves, but we are going to use, of course, ChatGPT, because we can use this to ask for almost anything. For example, using this, which says create an HTML formatted message to be sent via email from n8n. The message should begin with a greeting using the user's name, field full name, thank them for completing a form, and display their data in a list: email, phone, and company. Add a closing text stating that the message was sent automatically. Use a simple style with Arial font and soft colors. Show me only the HTML code with the correct n8n variables inserted. So with this simple prompt, we can ask ChatGPT to create for us, this block of code that maybe if you don't have programming skills, you will never be able to do it by yourself. Once this code is completed, here is thanking the user, etc. Let's give it a couple more seconds. I am not editing this video, so you can see how much it takes. We can copy the code, coming back to n8n and paste it here, and trust that n8n will do the best for us. Let's close this assistant. We have completed everything here. We can close this, which is not showing anymore any problems with credentials, etc. And let's send a new form to see what happens here. Let's reload this contact form. Let's push this to here. Let me show you that I have this Gmail account that I created to send the email, and this Outlook account that I create to receive this email, the student n8n course, etc. So let's see if we get the email here. Let's go to this form and say that the name is Omar. Let's say that the last name is Salina. Let's say that the number is anything like this. Let's give it an email like anything, omar@gmail.com, and the message, hello again. Let's be sure that this is still waiting. Yes, it's waiting. Let's send it. The workflow is starting to work. It's appending it to the sheet. Then it's sending the email, and it says that everything worked successfully. Let's see. The Gmail account has added Omar Salina, and if we go to the Outlook, we don't see anything new here, but of course it's in the junk email. It didn't pass the filters. Let's move this to the main inbox to see it Yes, okay, I trust these people, it's me, it's myself. And here we can see the email. Hello, Marcelina, thank you for completing the form. Here is the information you submitted and the information that he sent. I am not seeing email and company, but the rest is fine. So let's do this. Let's check in n8n what happened here. First, I am going to say that now the email, it will not be just this student n8n course that I just created for this example, but it will be the actual email address that the student is sending to us. I will open this window to see whether what do we have here, if we have any errors. Yes, this is why we are not getting the email and the company in the actual email, because the word is not email, it's email address. Let's write it exactly. Address, now it's green. And company, this form doesn't have any company information. It has a message. So let's say here that it says message, and here we put message, and I write it better, okay, and now it has no more issues. If you don't find how to solve it yourself, in case it gives you some error, you can go back to ChatGPT, change it, etc. But the thing is that we already have a node that is capable to send information to the account of the user. Here's saying with this warning, node configuration change, output data might change when this node is run again. Okay, let's execute this step to solve this warning sign, and everything is great. We have completed a new step in our workflow. Let's go to the next lesson because there is a lot much more to do here. In this step, I am going to introduce you to a new element that you can add to your workflows. I can show you that between elements, as you saw before, you can add elements. For example, between these Google and these send email nodes, I can create another element, that's a new one, because I want to create or simulate a delay. A delay that isn't really necessary here, but sometimes you may need your actions not to be performed immediately. In those cases, you can delay the execution of the next node by a few seconds, a few minutes, hours, or even days, or even say when precisely, in which date and time, the workflow can keep going on. Many times, in the case of emails, you want them to be sent, I don't know, the next day, the next week, whatever. That's the purpose of what we are going to do here. And even many times you can also may want to simulate a human response, because when something happens instantly, it's obvious that it was done by a machine. And other cases are for helping to avoid spam filters, since too many actions at once can be detected and blocked as spam. Sometimes you may use it to synchronize with previous tasks, etc. In our case, it will demonstrate how to control timing within a flow. I will search here for a node named wait, so his name is very clear on what it does. And as you can see, this is a normal node that gets information from the input from the previous node and creates here with its parameters a delay, a waiting time to send the output. I will rename it. It will be called wait 5 seconds, because that's the time that I'm going to set here. I don't need to make it longer for demonstration purposes, but here you can set any time you want. You can choose when to resume after a time interval. It will be our option here, but you have all these other options for resuming the workflow. And with these two options, you can say, okay, 5 seconds or 5 days or minutes or etc. I will just leave it as it is, because 5 seconds is the amount of time that I wanted. Just to show you, you can say, okay, no, I prefer to resume at a specific time. Then you set here when, precisely which day this thing has to resume to continue, and here you set the specific hour of that day. But let's go to our 5 seconds time interval. Now let's close this. Let's tidy up the thing so it's all at view, and let's try again putting this to execute the workflow. Let's call the contact form again to send another user like Paul Brown and another fake phone number. The email that we are using to check if the emails are received, which is student n8n course at outlook.com, and another hello, just simple as that. Let's submit this form. Let's go to n8n and see that when the workflow gets to the wait, it waits 5 seconds before going to the send email. And so in the email, we get now this next email, which is the one sent to Paul Brown from our email. So it's everything working the same, but we have this delay that we on purpose has set here to have a better management of what and when our workflow does anything. Consider that this doesn't mean that the email will get at exactly 5 seconds. It will take 5 seconds to get to this node, and then it's the time, for this node to process its own thing, for the Outlook server to process the email and send it. That may cause an extra delay, the proper delay of sending an email. These are just 5 extra seconds to ignite that part of the process. Congratulations on mastering this new step and learning a new element for your workflows. And since there's still so much more ahead, let's move on to the next lesson right away. This additional step that we are going to add to our workflow is enriching the user's data. We're going to take extra information that we can incorporate into the record to either send a Telegram message with it, to store it in HubSpot, or even to include it in the user's data logs. Now, the data that I am going to use to enrich the user's record is their geographic location, and we will be able to obtain that because among the data sent by our webhook, we have the user's IP address. If we check this output information from this node, you will find, if you use the same service as me, this tag or this key, which is X real IP, which sends you the information that is hidden in these numbers of the specific geographic location of the final user. Of course, that if you're using a different form service, you might find the IP under a different tag or different key. So pay attention to where the IP might be stored for you, because all this JSON package of information will be organized or structured in a different way. And also, let me clarify something. Not all the form services provide the IP. For example, one of the most popular, which is Google Forms, it doesn't offer it because it stores that information for security and privacy reasons. But since I have used a different service that does provide the IP, I can use it now. So be aware of that. Why would we want to enrich the data of our users that we already have using this IP information? Well, this adds a lot of value to the information that we store without requiring any extra effort from the user's side. The user doesn't have to do anything for this data to be included. They doesn't say, okay, city, address, etc. And for us, it improves personalization in follow-up messages, in our CRM, in our marketing strategies, etc. It even allows us to tag or to segment leads without relying on the user input. So it adds invisible data that can help automate your process more intelligently. Imagine that you can manage your campaigns, for example, depending on the location of your users. So this gives useful context to your sales or your marketing teams. So how do we do this? Okay, what I'm going to do now is add this process in parallel to the user's data registration. Why? Just to demonstrate that sometimes we can execute processes in parallel and not always in line one after the other. For example, to continue without being blocked by delays, in this case, for example, the waits, because maybe we want this information to be processed immediately, and then we will need that to be in a different path, in a different flow of this entire workflow. So I will take this point here in the normalized data, I will drag another line and drop it here. This asks us for the next node to add in this connector, and I'm going to look for the HTTP request node. I will choose this one. This node will receive all the data. I will rename it to enrich data. Yes, I like to put names to my nodes. It helps not only me, but anyone to understand better what's happening here. And now we will configure how to enrich the data throughout this HTTP request. I will choose the post method to send information, and I will paste a URL from an external service. Why? Because I need a website that receives this IP number that I showed you before, these numbers and dots, because this service will take that information, which is an IP address, and will return a JSON file with detailed geolocation information. So this service that I am going to use now, you can use a different one, of course, is called ipapi.co. I recommend you to try with this one because it's very good one. As you can see, it's taking my actual IP and giving me back information, which is correct about where I am, because yes, I am in Sicily, Italy right now. This is not my home, that's why I'm sharing this information without problems. But I want to show you this. Here we have my actual IP address. I will copy it. I will paste it here after the URL of this site. I put the slash and then I paste that same IP. If I execute this URL with the IP included in the name of it, I get the same information. So I can compose or concatenate this ipapi.co slash and the IP later to get the information of the user. I don't need to use the search box here to check for IPs manually. So that's what I'm going to do in the node. I will copy this. I will come to the URL that this requires. I will paste this, but I will delete the rest. I don't need this. What I need is what I get in the webhook, as we saw before, this X real IP that we have here, and drag it and put it here after the slash. So if I drop it here, you can see that this is composing a URL, but I have to delete this space. And now we're getting this result that you see down here, https://ipipi.co/ and the specific number of these users, but this will change with every information that the users send. But I also want you to notice that if I execute this step with this URL as it is, we will get something very strange, which is all this text. Let me check the JSON file. It's a very long file with a lot of information, so impossible to read because everything is stored into this key, which is data, just one single key for all the rest of the information that is stored in a lot of text. So this is no easy to parse to get the information that we need. And the way to do this much more cleaner and easy to read is adding after the URL another slash and the word JSON. This will parse the information, transforming it into a JSON file, which will make it more readable. Let's execute this step again, and with this difference, we get this info so much better structured with the IP, the network, the version, city, region, etc., and we can see this information so much more clearly. Of course, also in the table format or the schema format, everything works fine. If you want, you can also read the longitude, latitude, etc., every piece of information that you want to use or you need to use to manage your contact. This has been a super useful step, and we will continue in the next lesson with more to add to our workflow. The goal of this lesson is to configure a Telegram bot and connect it with n8n to receive instant notifications in Telegram every time that someone submits the contact form. This will allow you or your team to receive immediate alerts with the key information of each new lead, and maybe even write on your phone if that's your preference. That's one of the many things that n8n workflows can do. Why we will use Telegram for notifications? Well, because it's fast, It's secure, it's free, that's a very good point, and it's ideal for real-time alerts without relying on email. Also, you can receive them on your phone, on your computer, or wherever you prefer. Let's start by creating a Telegram bot. For that, you need, of course, to have your own Telegram account. I will check for Telegram on Google, choose the first link that I have, and since I am already logged in, I will go straight into my Telegram platform. Now, in the search bar, I will look for a very special account or user, which is @botfather. Check that botfather exists for everyone. You will see too if you write that name. So let's choose botfather. Here we are in the main chat with this botfather that exists for the solely purpose of manage the creation of bots. Here you have a small instructions on how it works, but it's better to go straight to the start button to start a conversation. And this conversation starts with Botfather giving you a lot of commands that you can use to do your thing. The one we want to use is this new bot that we have here. It will start a conversation where Botfather says, all right, a new bot, how are we going to call it? Please choose a name for your bot. You can choose any name you like. For example, new bot n8n will be my name. I hit enter and it said good. Now let's choose a username for your bot. It must end with bot, like this, for example, Tetris bot or Tetris underscore bot. This name has to be unique, so it has to be something that no one has chosen before. I will choose n8n underscore contacts underscore bot. Let's see if this works. It seems that it is done. Congratulations on your new bot. You will find blah, 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 a lot of information. You can read it, of course. But the important thing here is that the bot is giving you an HTTP API. This code is unique. You need to keep your token secure or store it safely because it can be used by anyone to control your bot. And that's why I am actually hidden this code that I am having here, because you have to be responsible with this kind of information. So I already saved it in a notepad so I can have it for when I need it. The second step, it will be to get the chat ID. I will need this number that is the ID of the chat because each Telegram chat has a unique chat ID, which you will also need to configure the Telegram node in n8n. So to get it, start a conversation with your bot. So let's call here n8n underscore contacts underscore bot. Here you have the bot that I just created. It has its name and the username. Both names are useful to find it. Let's choose it. Let's start a conversation. Let's say hello bot or anything just to start this conversation. And from here, we will take the chat ID. But for that, we need to go now to n8n and temporarily create a Telegram trigger. This will be used just to get the chat ID. So it doesn't matter where you add it. You can even add it in the middle of the canvas. It doesn't care. Telegram. If you go for Telegram and you choose, you will find in the last part the triggers. And there we have the on message Telegram trigger. This is the one we are going to use. Here in this Telegram trigger, you will need to use your credentials to connect with Telegram. We are going to create a new credential. And guess what? The access token that you have to put here is the one that Botfather has given to you. So I paste it here, I save, and everything seems to work correctly. Yes, perfect. So now we have my account associated with this node. So let's run this trigger that we have here. And now we have to do this hello that I said before, sorry. Let's say now hello, send it, and n8n will capture it and give us in the information that it's outputting in this Telegram trigger the chat ID that we have here. Notice that is inside the chat object and then in the ID tag. Copy it and paste it in somewhere safely to store it, and you can now delete this Telegram trigger that is here. It's alone in the middle of the canvas. It was just useful for getting the chat ID, and now we don't need it, so let's delete it, and that's it. And now we will move to the third step, which is sending a Telegram message from our workflow. So now you can add a send message node to, let's say, this part of the workflow. Let's go for Telegram again. Let's choose this node, and the node that we want to get here is called a text message. This is the one we will include. Let me show you how it looks like. It's here, it has the Telegram icon, but it's saying that it's needing configuration, of course, its parameters. The Telegram account is the one that we already have connected. The resource, it will be message. The operation, it will be send message. The chat ID is the one that I just have copied from the output information of the Telegram trigger. And the text, it will be a composition of a message with data from previous steps, like, I don't know, the name, the email, the country. For example, we can say a new user has been registered, colon, and then say name, for example, but let's put it in a different line. Let's open this to work better. Name, that it is. Let's close it. We don't have any information previous, so I will retrieve it again. No, we are not getting it because we need to start this event again. Let's call a new user that provides us some information so we can do some testings now. Let's call Peter Awesome. Let's say that the phone number is this. Let's write an email like peterawesome@mail.com, and again, hello. Let's send this. Let's see if Peter has been stored correctly in the send a text message node. And yes, we have here all the information from these three sources: HTTP request, normalized data, and webhook. So we can say now that the name of this user is the name that we have in the normalized data, full name. Let's put it here. Now we can create jumps between lines. That's better. That's the name. The email of this user is the one that we have under email address. And lastly, we can say that the country, let's use the IP information that we get, it's not in the normalized data, it's in the HTTP request. Let's go for country, has the country code, but country name is what better represents what I want to show in the message. So now everything is set up. So let me show you that in the Telegram message, we have nothing yet, just the hello that we sent. But let's send now this, executing this step. The message is supposed to be sent. And if we look here, we have a new user has been registered, the name, email, country, etc. And it's saying that this message was sent automatically with n8n. I love this, so I will put the heart here. I love it. So finally, we have learned now in our workflow how to create a Telegram bot, how to connect it to n8n, how to capture the chat ID, and how to send custom messages to Telegram when a form is submitted. Congratulations, and let's continue to the next lesson to keep building your automation. Let's keep building this fun workflow, and the next step is to integrate our lead, our registered user, with HubSpot. This application, HubSpot, allows us to connect leads so we can later take action with them, or maybe just store them. But what we're going to do now is to automate the creation of contacts throughout the HubSpot CRM, and we're going to assign them a label based on whether the contact, for example, is from Europe or not, because we are interested in that, to segment our leads into Europeans and other continents. And for that, we are going to use the IP information that we get from the HTTP request. The first step, it will be to create an HubSpot account. Maybe you already have it. I do. So look for HubSpot, and I will go straight into the account that I already have. You maybe will need to create your own account, of course, but once there, be sure to go to the CRM section where you will see your actual contacts if you have them, or this empty table that we are going to start populating automatically with n8n. So now let's go back to n8n to create a credential that allows us to use a HubSpot in our workflows. Then I will go to my first project so I can choose credentials. I can see the other 3 credentials that I already have, and I will choose this arrow here to select create credential. This is a different way to do the same. I am not creating it from the node, but from the outside, and then we're going to use it in the node. Here, you should find the HubSpot OAuth 2 API. This is the one we want. Let's continue. Let's connect my account. This will open this window where I choose the account that I have created. You should choose your own. Choose account, and after a couple of seconds, this window, it will be showing me that it's everything successful. Okay, it's closing in 5 seconds, and we are connected to HubSpot already. Let's go back to the workflow. Let's go back to process submissions, and here we have our workflow. Let's zoom out a bit so we can see everything a little better with more space. And after sending the email, I'm going to add here this HubSpot node that I can choose. This gives me options, of course. And from here, we are going to select the create or update a contact. When you choose this, let me show you, you will have this nice node next to the send email that is requiring, of course, more information. Let's open to configure it. In the HubSpot account, we already have the credentials that we choose before. In the resource, we will let contact here. In the operation, create or update. And in the email, I should drag the information of the user, since I don't have data yet, and if I execute it, it won't work yet because I need to configure this. I will put just any email at email.com, just to don't give me a. Let's close this for a minute and let's send another example from our form. Let's open it again. This time it will be Laura Palmer. Maybe this rings any bell. Okay. Another fake phone number. Laura Palmer at twinpeaks.com, and the message is welcome. Let's submit this. Let's see if it has worked. Yes, everything is working on. The Telegram has given me a new message. Everything has flowing here. It's waiting, it's sending emails, and it's creating or updating a contact. So supposedly, if I look here, I should have this information that it's not real, not complete, because it has this email that I have created. We just need to configure this better, but it has created the connection, as you can see. Let's open this again, and with the information that we already have, let's choose a different email here. It will be the normalized data email address, but we also need to provide more properties of this contact. So far, we are not sharing anything else more than the email. So let's add properties, and here we have the headers that HubSpot has as options for their tables of leads. So let's go to look for a name. Here we have first name, and notice that HubSpot doesn't have the full name that we had in the normalized data. We have the full name. So in this case, we will need to use some previous information, previous to the normalization of the data. So let's choose first name here, and we will feed this field not with this full name, of course, but with the information that we get from the webhook. Here you will find the first name of the user, because they entered it in separate, the first name here, and then add property. We can look here for the last name, and then we put this value, which is Palmer in this case, and we can keep adding more properties of the user that you can check here, like phone number, lead status, etc. You can determine which one of these columns you want to fill. Phone number, I think, is relevant, so I will create this property for phone number, and we have that information. I prefer to take it from the normalized data. Perfect. The email, we already have it here. But now let's get out of here because I told you that I want to identify if this user is from Europe or from another country to save them with this specific information. Let's say it's because I have certain promotions for European users or for the different laws that regulate the use of the information, etc. I need to identify this with a different tag for Europeans or not Europeans. That information, as you can see, is not accessible from this node because we have the send email information, the weight, the append, the normalize, the webhook, all these other variables, but not the HTTP request that we did here with this node. This is because this information goes in different flows. But I can solve this dragging this line and putting it with this HubSpot node. So now it gets the information also from the HTTP request. So let's tidy up this to look a little better. I think it's messy a little. Let's zoom out. Okay, maybe this is the better we can do. No, I'm sure we can do better. This looks a little better. Okay, but here the information we have about the continent, which is Europe, will be different for every user, of course, saying the continent that they are in, but I want to differentiate not every continent. I want to create two groups, Europe and non-Europe. And the other countries won't tell me not Europe, will tell me America, Asia, whatever. So let's create in the middle of this another if node that we were going to use to identify if the user is from Europe or is not from Europe. So the value, it will be the continent code. Let's put it here. We will check if it's equal to EU, which in this case is true. So if I execute this step, the information will flow to the next node to the through branch. Or I could ask if it's not equal to Europe, which will give me false. So if I execute this, it will flow on the false branch. So let me show you how this is working. Right now the information goes to the false branch, which is leading to nothing. I will cut this true branch and link this one. So in this HubSpot node, we will save the information from people who is not from Europe. So let's rename this and rename and say register contacts not from Europe. So we're clear that this is what this node is going to do. So now in this node, we can create a new property that maybe we don't have here. Of course, we don't, and a property that says European or not. So let me try to create a new category in my HubSpot account. I will go to edit columns, so it will give me these options. And of course, there are no European related categories here, so I can do this, create a property. I will create a new property for my CRM account. The property level will be European, and I let the other options like they are. We need to change this field type to select what type of information will we have here. And I think that a single checkbox is what we want to have here. It will be something like a true or false. A checkbox with a check or empty, it's true or false. Now we can create this new column in our CRM. Let me see if it's showing it properly. So far, it has been created, but not yet added here. So edit columns, and now we can look for the European category that we have already created. That, as you can see, it is down here. Let's put it up here. Let's close these other categories that we don't want, like company size, preferred channels, and let it like this. Apply. This will be our new list of contacts. Let me delete this one that it was just for testing purposes with delete. I delete one. and now it should be clean. Okay, let's go back again to this part of the n8n node, add a property, and then here we won't find the European category, it won't be added here, so we have to go to this custom properties option. This will add these custom properties here, where you can add a custom property. Here you have to select, it will check in the personalized columns that you have created, maybe in your HubSpot account, and European is mine. Remember that I decided that the type of this category, it will be some kind of Boolean, because it will be a checkbox with a yes or not information, a true or false. So the value that I will put here in the case for these contacts that are not Europeans, it will be an expression that will say between these curly brackets the word false. So this will tell that the information for that column, for this case, it will be a no. So let's execute this step so we can create this execution and go to HubSpot to see if we have created a new contact. This is not updating. Let's refresh this page to see if it's done. Yes, Laura Palmer with her email, her fake phone number, and in European, where we set the false code, it has shown a no. So it's working. Let's see if the decision making is working fine. We said that this should be for false when it's not European, but if I remember well, this is from Europe. Oh, we are checking if it's not equal to Europe. So we need to change something here. We will say that when this coincidence is true, let's say it's equal to Europe, it has to go to the true branch, and when it's not, to the false branch. So let's execute this step so it goes differently. And here we are going to say that we want another HubSpot that we are going to duplicate. If we find the duplicate part, here it is, duplicate. We will put this here and connect it to the positive branch. Let's tidy up this a little more. Let's say that this one, it will be register contacts from Europe. These guys are going to be from Europe. So these ones will say that the value for European, it will be true, and the other ones will be false. So this way we have two ways of registering someone in our CRM, depending of if they went through this branch, being a coincidence that they are from Europe, or not if they are not. Let's empty this because it was made during the testing practices. Now that it's empty, we're going to send another user. We're going to put this to listen. We're going to create a new contact. This time it will be Donald Duck. It will be any other number. It will have the Donald at disney.com and quack. And let's send this to see if it goes through all this workflow. It's appending the sheet, it's waiting 5 seconds, it's sending the email, and the workflow has been executed completely. But I am noticing a problem here. We got to these registered contacts not from Europe, from two sides of the workflow. So if we check this and it updates, let's update it manually, we will see that Donald Duck is not from the European zone, but because we have to delete this connector and let it only coming from this part, because Donald Duck is supposedly in the European community. Here you have, so the registering has been wrong. It went from the wrong side, but it worked wrongly because the workflow was messy. Let's delete this again. One, delete. And now that we have corrected the workflow with these connectors, Let's do it again one more time. Let's put it to execute. Sorry for that. Testing, learning, developing, it means making errors. Let's call Bart Simpson. Let's put, no, the last name here, Simpson. Let's say that his number is this one, Bart at gmail.com. Hey, says Bart, let's submit. I made a problem with the dot here. Let's submit again. Okay, it's go throughout all this part of the system, but the only way to get now to HubSpot, it was through the if. So this time maybe if we did everything right, but it will be from the European Union. That's correct. Our workflow is working properly now. I am very happy because during this lesson you learned how to create a contact in HubSpot, how to detect if the user has certain condition, how to tag the content appropriately based on that, and how to prepare the data for segmentation, campaigns, and sales assignments. Another great step, and the next lesson is even better. So I see you there. This lesson will add a lot of value because it shows how to automate specific actions for the team. We are going to learn how to incorporate one more node that will allow us to schedule a follow-up task after a contact is received. This is an excellent professional practice, and we will do it with a Google app called Google Tasks that I have already opened here. You can go to task.google.com/tasks and you will get this if you are logged, of course, in your Google account. Of course, you can use any task management apps that integrates with your system. This is just an example. I decided to use Google Tasks, but there are many more up there. And specifically, we're going to automate the creation of a task inside Google Tasks when a new contact is received. This task will include a title, a description, and a personalized due date so the team can follow up within, let's say, 48 hours. So let's go back to n8n, and the step-by-step for this, it will be first to make sure that you have your Google Task account created, which we already checked. Second, adding the node here for the Google Task. Let's do it here after this first HubSpot. Then we're going to connect it with the other two. But first, we will add these tasks node that we have here, Google Task, create a task. That's the one we want. Let me close this so I can show you. Now this connector doesn't go here. This connector goes here. So both HubSpot nodes, after registering the user, no matter if it's from Europe or not, let me rename this because it needs a correction here. Europe, yes. After any one of these nodes, it will go directly to the create task node that needs, of course, that we give it credentials here. Let's create a new credential, of course. I will sign in with my Google account. I see you in a couple seconds. And now that I already did it, you will do the same with your account. Let's close this. Resource, it will be a task. Operation, it will be to create a task. In task list name or ID, we cannot fetch any options yet because we need to maybe reopen this. And yes, now we can see the only task list that we have in our task account, which is my task. It's the default list for task. I don't want to use this. I will create a new list. Let's say n8n follow ups and done. We have created a new list. Now let's go to n8n again and let's see if the list is refreshed. It is not. Let's close and reopen. And here we have n8n follow up. That's the one that I want. The title, it will be follow up and then the name of the user that I want to follow. So I am going to take this information from the normalized data. Let's drag the full name after this follow up with a single space. So here it says follow up Bart Simpson, which is the last case that we have here. But let's add some more info. For example, a notes field where we can add things like email, colon, and drag the email address. Let's add another one like phone colon and dragging the phone of Bart here, or any other information that you want to add. But also I will add this very important field, which is due date. That means when I want this task to be completed. So let's choose due date, and here how can we calculate the due date? Let's say that we want it to be finished in 48 hours, 2 days. Okay, let's grab from variables and context the today information. Let's put it here. And in this code, we need to calculate something to add 2 more days to the today information. I will click after the word today. I will write a dot, and this will open a couple options for methods that the today object offers me. One of them is plus. Plus allows me to add some properties to say how much time I want to add to this today date. I have to give it a number and then a unit. So I will say that it has to add 2 first, then the comma to say between quotes days. I will add 2 days to the today, so you can see the result here. For me is July 8th, so here it says that the July 10th, it will be the due date for this follow-up task. So let's execute this step. We can see here the output information, but most importantly, in the task account of Google, you can see that follow-up Bart Simpson with its information, it's added with all the details. So this was another successful step where we did a lot of stuff like using the Google Tasks node, like receiving input from both HubSpot branches, like building a dynamic title and description, and calculating a dynamic due date using expressions. Using Google Tasks is very practical. It helps you stay on top of follow-ups, and it syncs with mobile apps and Gmail. This is another big step in our workflow creation, but we're not done yet. There's more to build in the next lesson. See you there. Throughout this entire section, we have been building this workflow, which is now practically complete. We have an entry webhook where we receive information from a form and we process it across different branches, nodes, and connectors that we have been working on all this time. I think we now have a fairly complete workflow, and we could say that we are satisfied with everything that we have integrated here and want to finalize it since there's nothing else to add. Let's say that's the case. Well, what will be the next step in that case? An excellent way to professionally wrap up a workflow is to provide a clear and structured response to the initial webhook at the very end of the process. So in this lesson, we're going to finalize the automation flow by making the last connector return a structured JSON response to the input webhook, indicating whether the process was successful. This can include a timestamp to show how long it took to process everything and any other relevant information as confirmation. To do this, let's scroll to the end of our workflow and do a little zoom in to put attention here in the last part of our workflow, and we will add a last node to this workflow called respond to webhook. Here it is. Before finishing, I want to connect it with both ends of our workflow. So every piece of information that happened during the workflow ends up in this node that will respond to the trigger webhook with how things went along the way. And even this node also have a last connector. We are not going to use it to output anything. This will be the last piece of action for our workflow. Let's configure this respond to webhook. So let's open the window here. And the main setting we need to configure is the response mode or response width that we have here in the first place. That will be what we want to send back to the original webhook. We could choose all incoming items, binary file, first incoming item, etc. Everything that we have here, we can answer in any way we want. It's just information, confirmation on how everything went on. In our case, I will choose JSON so we can manually compose a structured response. Remember that you can either use values from the data inputs or manually define the structure right here in this response body, in this case that we are going to use a JSON response. Let's create a simple JSON structure that I have copied and I will paste it here, which is this one. Let me open it so you can see it more clearly. And this is the information that we are going to send back. A key status that it says success, because if we end in this node, it's because everything went great. A message that says form received and processed successfully, because our workflow did everything in the middle. The name of the person, the email, and the timestamp to let the first webhook to know how much time it took to do everything. You can create something like this, you can create something different. This is a personalized answer that we are sending in any way we want. If you want to do something like this, pay attention to the structure, which is these curly braces at the beginning and the end. Inside everything, it's ordered in keys and values, always with quotes, a colon in between them, and always a comma to jump to the next line to be sure that the code understands the difference between every line. Make sure that your syntax is valid, otherwise you will get errors. If something doesn't work, of course, you can check ChatGPT and ask what is going wrong. You can check if your dynamic values, like for example JSON email, are being inserted correctly and in between quotes and in between these two curly braces that, remember, is JavaScript. Once the syntax is correct, the node will return this JSON to the original webhook. Now, this setup, it will work only, let me zoom out, it will work only if all branches eventually lead to this final node. But in our case, we have a problem because one of our branches ends without connecting to this webhook response. So I can also connect it here and tie this up so it fits everything well. I don't know if the most best looking workflow in the world, but it's clear, I guess. And before we end here, now that we have this respond to webhook final node, we need to change something at the beginning. Let me open this initial trigger webhook, and we need to change the respond method. We have right now the when last node finishes, but now the response won't come to this node when the last node finished, but using respond to webhook node. We have now this kind of node, so maybe now you understand better what this option is here. So let's put that into it. We have here a warning that it says insert a respond to webhook node to control when and how you respond. We already have it. We can close this. We can save this to have everything safely and secure in the n8n browser. And let's do a final testing. Let's execute this workflow. Let's call another contact form. This time it may be March Simpson. Why not? She has a phone that is surely not this one that I am creating here. Her email for sure is not marsh@simpson.com, and let's say that she sends a message that says Homer and send it. In our webhook, everything is moving on. This one is taking more time. It's going now to the waiting time. It's taking some seconds also to send supposedly the email, and here we are in the respond to webhook. Let's check if the user has been registered here. Yes, Marge Simpson is here. The Telegram account shows me the message that says that Marge Simpson has been registered. We have, I hope, Marge Simpson also with Bart in the HubSpot account with the information about that she's from Europe, and in the task we now have a follow-up for Marge Simpson. Everything it's look like working fine, and the email, of course, we cannot check if it has come because the email was sent to the email of Marge, who is Marge@Simpson, and since this is a fake address, I cannot check if the email was sent, but let's say that it was. And finally, the respond to webhook, it's giving two errors here because yes, I didn't use the right names here. Name wasn't nombre, which is the Spanish word for name. Sorry for that. Is my habit to use Spanish names. Let's replace this by taking the normalized data of full name here, and also the email will be replaced with a better way of writing it, which is dragging this, and here we have now the complete answer that we want to send. Let's execute this step, and now we can see that the information has been sent with the correct information to this webhook. We now have successfully added a professional confirmation to the entire flow, and this means that your workflow is ready to be used in real environments where confirmation messages are required. Celebrate this milestone, and there's still more to come, so follow me to the next lesson where something exciting awaits for you. We have already considered our workflow finished, but we can add a feature that goes beyond this workflow. For example, at the end of the day, once all users who needed to register have done so, we could send an email to the team with a list of the new registrations collected that day. In other words, the goal of this lesson is to create a parallel workflow that runs only once per day and generates a report including all instances in which the main workflow has been used. To do this, we need a different trigger here, different than the one that we have used so far. So now we want a trigger that activates at a specific time of the day. So we will hit this plus button to create a trigger separated from this workflow. We will go to this add another trigger, and we will choose the on a schedule trigger that runs the flow every day or every hour or every custom interval. This is what we want. Here we can define the timing for when we want this parallel workflow to run, and we are not yet saying what this workflow will do, only when it will start. We will set the interval to daily, so we will keep it in days as it was, because you can also choose, as you can see, seconds, minutes, hours, etc. This is a very different trigger from the one that we used before. This is set in terms of specific times. In this case, let's say that I want this trigger to be executed at 8 a.m. every day. So I will choose days between triggers 1, trigger at hour, let's choose this 8 a.m. hour, and trigger at minute 0, because I don't want to be 8 and 10 or 8 and 30, it's just 8 o'clock. And we will leave it like this. Now we can close this and see that here we have our parallel workflow that it has been starting to be created down here or wherever you want to put it. And we will connect this trigger with two more nodes. One that reads all the entry in our Google Sheet, and another that filters only the ones that were created today. So let's first add another Google Sheets node, but it will not be the same that we used before, because previously we used this append row in a sheet. Now what we want to do is get rows in sheet. We want to read, so this get rows in sheet is the one that we want. Again, select your account. It will be the same that you have already inserted. The resource will be a sheet within a document. The operation, it will be get row or rows in plural, depending on how many cases we have for these specific days, for the last 24 hours. The document, it will be chosen from the list, and here we have the registered users, that is the same spreadsheet that we have before, where it has been fed with all the cases that we set during this project. And finally, the sheet, it will be the user's sheet. Once that's done, you can keep adding more conditions, but we will leave everything as it is, and let's execute the workflow manually by clicking this execute previous nodes. This only gives us the input data about when the workflow was triggered. And note that it wasn't triggered at 8 a.m. You can see it here and in this specific hour, which is 11:45 a.m., which is the time that I am recording this. And this is because I activate it manually. You can also test it this way. Otherwise, it will run automatically at 8 a.m. But we can't wait until 8 a.m. to record this video. Now we should execute this step, but before that, I will be sure that I have cases for today. And since today is July 9th for me, I will only get this case which was created in this same date, but I will change the date of this one also, so we have at least two cases that are given back by this test. Okay, so we have Bart and March that should be retrieved when this node is executed. Let's execute it and we will get row number 2, full name Lucas Smith, etc., because this is the first case. This case doesn't comply with what we want. Why? Because we didn't set yet the filters to decide which cases will be read when we activate this step. So far it's sending everything, every case, and we are here just seeing the first case. If we see it in a JSON format, you see that it's reading every case. The row number 2, the row number 3, the row number 4, we still didn't filter by the date. We could filter this by adding a filter, of course, that it will let us select one of the columns, it will be date, and then created a formula to decide which cases should be included and which not. But instead of doing that, I prefer to be even more clear by reading everything here, getting out of this node, and then adding another one to filter what cases are going to be included. For that, we are going to use a node that we haven't used yet, one that can filter and determine which items pass and which don't. And if you're wondering why not use an if node that we have used before to establish conditions and decide what to do with the information that we're getting, we are not using an if node because the if node checks a single data item and not an array of objects like the one that is being returned by the Google Sheets. It's returning an array, a collection of cases, and the if node, it will check only one case and not every one of them. So since we're dealing with a collection of records, which is an array, we will use a slightly more complex node, which I will explain to you, and its name is, let's look for it, code node. Code runs custom JavaScript or Python code. So here we are getting closer to, programming, which you will say, hey Fede, you promised that I could do everything here without code. And that is still true, because while we could write code here to filter the data and return only today's records, there's a simpler way to do it, which is using this Ask AI. We don't need to write our own code in n8n, because you can do it if you want, of course, but you can ask the AI, what do you want to do? And it will give you back the code that you need to do that. So now I will paste a prompt that I have already written. It's very simple. Generate code that reads all rows from a spreadsheet from the input and returns only those with a date equal to today. Let's generate this code. Now the AI is working for me, and it has given me all the code instructions for this node to select from the JSON file that we are getting only those who belong to today's date. So it's not necessary that I explain in detail what it does, but just for you to see, because this will be maybe different from what you get, since the AI always gives different answers even to do the same thing. Here is creating first a variable that is called rows, which contains all the rows, another variable called today, which contains the date that is today, then creates another variable called filtered rows, which applies a system to decide which of those rows are only from today's date, and then it returns to n8n those filtered rows. So if you execute this, let's see what's happening. Let's see what it gives us back. It gives us back, as you can see, only the rows that belong to the date of today, July 9th for me, and some other date for you, of course. But this is working properly. I didn't have to type a single line of code as I promised it to you, just using the AI of n8n. So we have now this parallel workflow that does his thing. Even when this webhook is triggered every time a user sends a form, this trigger, it will only be activated at a certain time of the day. It will check what is on the Google Sheet that we are feeding here in this part of the other code, and it will filter only the ones that we want. In the next lesson, we will see how to send a daily email to your team with this information. And so we have reached the final lesson of this comprehensive workflow that we have built, where we were adding the last step, which is sending a daily email with the day's new registration. We have already succeeded in generating everything from the trigger to the code that gathers and processes the day's records and stores them in a variable that we can see inside the node that is called filtered rows, that we will pass to the next node. The next node won't send the email just yet. First, it needs to check whether there are any records for the day, because if there aren't, there's no need to send an email. And since we need to make a decision now, yes, we are going to use this if node, which, as you know, lets us define conditional logic. This node receives the output from the previous one. I am seeing these previous records here that are from today. If you don't see any input while doing this practice, you can always trigger the flow manually again to pull data from Google Sheets. Now, how do we verify if there are records or not? We will need to use a bit of code here, because we are not receiving a direct value indicating the number of records, just the output from the previous code node, and the Google Sheet wouldn't help us either, because it sends us everything here and doesn't filter anything, and the schedule trigger doesn't have this information. So we don't have any piece of information that says, yes, there is at least one row here. So we will write a small expression instead. So we will switch here from fixed to expression and use the JavaScript syntax with these double braces that you have seen before, and the expression will check whether the list of items has a length greater than 0. So I will call with the money sign the items, and from there the length property to check on the amount of elements that are inside these items. But I don't want to just use that information. I want to know if that length is greater than 0. So this expression won't give us back a number. It will give us back a true or false answer. It will say, is true that the length of the items is greater than 0, or is false that the amount of items are greater than 0. So I want to check if that expression is equal to true. If it's true, that's what I want to check. In this case, since we have two cases, it's true because the number 2 is greater than the number 0. So if I execute this step, the output of this if node, it will go to the true branch and not through the false branch, because there is no false expression here. There is a true expression here. And if we go to the workflow, we can see that the green line is the one that goes in the true connector here. So only in the true connector is where we want to send the email, not in the false connector, because if there is no cases today, I don't want to send this email. But I won't send the email here directly. Why? Because we want the email body to include a formatted list of all the contacts that were registered today. But the send email node that we have used before here, it can't iterate over an array of items on its own. So instead, we will add another one of these codes node that we used before to use another piece of code that will loop throughout the data and generate an HTML formatted list. So let's set the code node to run once for all items and choose JavaScript as a language. You can either write the code yourself, as I told you, or you can ask the AI to do it, and that's what we are going to do. And I will paste a prompt that I have already written. You can paste exactly the same or write a different one, but I am saying I want to generate an HTML list with all contacts received as input. Each item should display the name in bold and the email next to it. The result should be saved as a single string in a variable and returned as output. So let's generate this code. Now the AI is thinking for me and is giving me back this code that I don't need to understand in detail, especially because you will get for sure a different code that will supposedly do the same purposes, but you can see that it's returning a code that is called HTML list. This is what is giving us back after processing this list to give us something that we can put in the email to print the list of today's users in the body of the email. So let's execute this step. So the output goes through here. Here is the code that the email will need. And here we will add now, finally, the send email node with the send email here. We will use it for the same account that we used before. The operation will be send. In the from email, I will use the same that I used before, the test course n8n at gmail.com. This will be the sender, and the receiver will be your team, for example, the email address of your team. I will put here the email that I have from student n8n course, so I can see it, outlook.com, so I can see the end result, so to check if working fine. As the subject, I will say daily contact summary followed by today's date that I will take from the schema on variables and context. I will drag the now information. This is the whole information of today's, but I want to filter to only shows me the date, not the hour, etc. So I will apply to this now a dot to choose the to format method, which will modify the way the information is shown. Check that to format has the F in uppercase. And the format, it will be that putting quotes here, we will say that shows the day in 2 digits, the month in 2 digits, and finally the year in 4 digits. That's the format that we want to show the date after this daily contact summary. And for the HTML body of the email, here is what the user will see once they open the email. We want a content that includes a greeting, a brief introduction, the actual list of contacts from this HTML list, and the note that the message was sent automatically by n8n. And for that, I have created this prompt that I want ChatGPT to use to create my HTML body, and the prompt says write the HTML body for an email to my team, including a greeting, a short intro, then insert a previously generated HTML list, variable name HTML list. I copied this from the previous node. Add a footer stating the message that was sent automatically by n8n. So what I want to teach you here is that you can always be assisted by AI, not only the inner AI from n8n, but also any other AI service that you want, like ChatGPT. Let's send this, and ChatGPT will generate for me the actual code that I need, because let's suppose that I don't know how to write HTML, which I know, but I want to show you how to do it if you don't. Here everything is working properly. Then let's copy this code. Let's go back to n8n and paste it here. Let's trust that ChatGPT did everything great, so let's leave it like it is. Let's run this node to see if it's sending the email. Supposedly it did, but the only way to check that for sure is to go to the email inbox, and here we see this email that in the title says daily contact summary and the date of today for me, and the body says, hello team, I hope you're doing well. Below is the information we gathered from our latest workflow, and here are the names of the two users that were registered in the same date as today, and the message about this being sent by n8n. So everything looks like have been working properly for my parallel workflow for sending daily emails. Congratulations on making it this far. This has been a fantastic piece of work, and I am truly proud of what we have accomplished together. There's so much more you can do with this workflow, like if you want, connecting multiple forms to different routes in the same flow, like assigning contacts to team members based on company or region, for example, or registering all events in a CRM or in a central database. I don't know, sending follow-up service, applying business logic based on behavior, on IP, on time of day, on tags, etc. The possibilities are endless. Thank you for following along, and see you in the next section. Up to this point, we have learned many details about how to create and configure workflows. And this has been a lot of fun, right? But now that you know and understand how to use n8n to build your workflows, I am going to show you a magic trick that will leave you speechless. In addition to configuring our workflows manually, we can also create them automatically using artificial intelligence. I am going to show you how to use Claude AI, the artificial intelligence developed by Anthropic, which works quite similarly to ChatGPT, but offers some workflow-oriented coding structures that are incredibly useful when working with n8n. But before we apply this, I want to explain one key concept to you. When you develop a workflow like the one we have been working on to process registrations with lots of visual elements, connectors, settings, etc., this is what you see as an n8n user. But behind the curtain, behind the scenes, n8n saves all of this as a code file. This code is written in a format which is called JSON, and it's spelled JSON. This file, which you can download and read, contains all the information needed to recreate that workflow structure inside the n8n platform. So just like you can create a workflow manually and n8n will generate that JSON code behind the scenes, you can generate a JSON file externally, and if you import that file into n8n throughout the three-dot menu using the import from file option, it will automatically recreate the entire workflow. It sounds like science fiction, right? Well, in the next lesson, I am going to show you that this is completely possible. So if the concept behind n8n is that every workflow is essentially a JSON programming file, this time we're going to generate a workflow directly by writing the code. But we are not going to write it ourselves, because this isn't a programming course, it's a course about automation. So we're going to use Claude, which you can access at cloud.ai, to describe in natural language the kind of workflow that we need. I already have a prompt ready here, but you can write whatever prompt you want. This one says, create a complete n8n workflow that checks tech news RSS feeds every hour, uses OpenAI, the ChatGPT engine, to filter only the news that is relevant for businesses, generates an executive summary, and sends it via email to the CEO. I am also asking it to respond in JSON format for n8n, meaning the response will be actual code that can be loaded into n8n to generate a fully functional workflow. Of course, you might be thinking, hey, that's black magic. That can't be done. Well, it can be done, and I am about to show you. If you are wondering how the AI will know what email configuration to use, don't worry, the JSON will leave placeholders so that we can fill in the credentials and required manual settings afterwards. Now I am going to send this prompt and let Cloud do the work. As always, the text response starts appearing, and on the side we begin to see the result. Cloud is already generating the code, and meanwhile the explanation is telling me what Claude is doing now, because this is the explanation of the response that Claude is going to give me in this other window. Once the code is finished, I will be able to download it using the copy button at the top. And I am intentionally not cutting this video so you can see in real time how long it takes for the answer to appear, and you can even compare that to how long it took us to build the previous workflow manually in the last section. That one was pretty complex and time consuming. So this is a great way to start working. It won't be 100% ready to use, but it will save you a lot of time and give you a solid base to work from. And maybe you're asking, hey Fede, why didn't you show me this at the beginning of the course? We could have just started this way. And the reason is AI is amazing for simplifying things, but when you don't understand the tool that you're using, the help it gives you won't be complete or useful. That's why it was important for you to first understand n8n deeply so that now you can take advantage of AI to accelerate your work and achieve even more. Cloud is now confirming that it was generated all the key components. We could go through it line by line, but I think it's better to move on. The important part is that here we have the code. I am going to click download as JSON to save it in my system, and in the next lesson we are going to upload that file into n8n to bring the workflow to life. One of the things that I enjoy most about my job as an instructor is surprising people, and I think this is one of those lessons where I'll get the chance to surprise you. As you know, in the previous lesson, we generated a JSON code by making a natural language request about the type of workflow that we need, and Cloud gave us a result, a code that I have already downloaded, but now I can load it directly into a new n8n workflow. I've named it AI workflow because that's exactly what it is, and I am going to click on the three dots here, scroll down to import from file, and here you will look throughout your folders and files for the JSON code that was downloaded from Cloud. Here is mine. I am going to open it now, so get ready, because what's about to happen is that we have a workflow that has been automatically created and that looks quite well structured. So let's try to understand it and see how we continue working with this workflow to get it ready in the next lesson. Although we are not going to take this workflow all the way to the end, because the idea isn't to complete another one, you already know how to do that, and it will take time that you don't need to spend, since it will just be a repetition of what you have learned before. What I want you to understand is that once you load a workflow that was created automatically by AI, it's likely that many of the nodes will require some modifications, so you can personalize them with your own credentials or data on things that the AI, of course, cannot anticipate. So first, let's try to understand what we have here. We have a trigger that is a time-based trigger. This one is set to run every hour, as we can see here. So every hour, this workflow will execute. Then it checks some nodes with tech news RSS feeds. Let's zoom in a bit to get a better look. Every one of these nodes goes for a different service of RSS feeds that was chosen completely by the AI. I can change this if I want, of course. These are different services, and we can see that the URLs chosen by the AI, which it decided were best for me, but they might not be. It chose them because I didn't specify which news sources I wanted. I could have been do that, but I didn't. You can change these, of course, as I said. You can add others. You can remove these ones, but the base structure for the task, it's already done. Next, we have this other node that serves for merging RSS feeds. So the AI has decided that this was the best approach. As the icon and the name suggest, this node merges the different RSS feeds. After that, we have this OpenAI node, which is probably responsible for determining which articles are relevant for businesses. But notice something. This node has a warning icon, a red triangle with an exclamation mark. If you hover over it, it will say, of course, what is the problem? And here is that the OpenAI credentials haven't been set. Of course, OpenAI uses a token-based system that requires payment. And to make payments, you need to provide an API key, a unique key to identify the account that is being used. And actually, the most possible thing is that you are not getting the same exact answer as me. You know that AI always gives different answers even for the same prompt. So maybe for you, this is different than me. I am just showing you how this process works, and you then approach what you get, checking what you need to do there or how to understand it. In this case, for this OpenAI node, I am not going to connect my credentials. We are not going to do that now. This is just for demonstration purposes. OpenAI will send the information to this next node, which checks whether the article were tagged as relevant by OpenAI. That's what the AI does. Keep in mind, I hadn't seen this workflow before. I am just explaining what the AI has generated for me. So I am trying to review it here like live with you. So I am trying to figure out what the AI planned. If you find it hard to understand what the code here is doing, you can, of course, just copy and paste it into an AI tool and ask questions like, what does this code do? Many times this code will even include a comment at the top explaining what it does. This may happen or no, of course, you can read them. And if you keep having any doubts or concerns, you go to the AI and ask questions. From the information shown, it seems that the news will be tagged as relevant by GPT. If the article is relevant according to ChatGPT, then this information will be processed and structured for my for the objectives of this workflow. So here, this is doing is likely formatting the data into a table or JSON file or some structured format that can then be passed to the next node. The next node is also a GPT node, and it also needs credentials, and it seems to prepare the final report to be sent. What happens next? Well, we see an email report. So that's what this automatically generated workflow does. Of course, I can modify things here. I can delete nodes that I don't need. I can add others that I want to include. But this is truly a powerful way to get started, saving tons of time and effort and even learning in the process. AI often introduces you to tools or to ideas that you didn't knew that they existed or hadn't thought of using. I hope this section has been useful for you and that it keeps boosting your skills upward.